Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Manufacturing Education Day. For those I haven't met, I'm Ryan Brickwood. I've been at Rea 2 years now. I lead our manufacturing and distribution industry. My previous background, I was with the J.M. Smucker Company for 17 years. I started as an analyst, focused on costing, inventory management, then was a controller, operation controller, helped with a lot of ERP system upgrades, implementations, integrations. And lastly, at Smucker's, I finished my career in FP&A, financial planning and analysis. So just got a quick background on myself. A couple logistics before we get started. Bathrooms, sorry, I'm getting an echo. Women's bathrooms to the left, outside these doors, men's bathrooms to the right. We're recording this audio only, so if you have a question, raise your hand. We have Andrew Geiser and Cody Smith somewhere to make sure we get the mic in front of you so that you get the question, we get it recorded, and then presenters, if you can, repeat the question, if just so that the audio picks up. So that's the logistics around that. We also are recording this, like I said, and if there's people that couldn't make it from your company, we can send the presentation and the slides. So if you miss anything when you're taking notes, or you want a section that you want to hear about, we'll send that to you. So you can make sure you get it, you have it, and then you can also broadcast it to your team. Some thank yous first before we get started. Kaitlyn, Becky, and Hannah, I want to personally thank them for all their hard work. They've done a great job of all the logistics. It made my job a lot easier, making sure I'm on track. This event wouldn't happen without those three. So again, appreciate all their support. Secondly, I want to thank the Hummel Group. We're partnering with them on this event. So again, thanks to them as well. And you'll hear them, Matt, Yost, and Tommy later on this morning. And then I want to thank in advance all the presenters, all their hard work getting the materials, all their hard work presenting today. So again, I want to thank them as well. And then lastly, I want to thank each and every one of you, again, for your time, investment, coming here. Again, we couldn't have this event with all you guys. We're hoping, with this, you get a lot out of it, but appreciate you guys taking the time. You guys run a day-to-day business, supporting your team. Again, taking the time to come meet with us. So again, thank you to all you guys. So with that, I'm going to kind of pivot. I want to make sure I get my notes. I'm going to pivot, kind of showcasing our manufacturing and distribution team. And I want to start with Mindy Gallman. She's a rock star, superstar. She's got 30 years experience. She started as an analyst. She's done controller work. She's been a director and a CFO of many companies. So again, have her on my team. And we have along with myself, with my 17 years, 20 years of manufacturing experience, and we have others in the firm that have manufacturing experience as well. And speaks to my another point is Andrew James bringing his talent along, leading our data analytics team. So why do I tell you about our team? Is because I want you guys to be aware we're all things for manufacturing. Okay, all things based on that talent that we have that I brought up with Mindy, people in our firm, myself and Andrew. We can do the blocking and tackling, the month-end close process. We can do controller work, looking at costing, variances, inventory. We can look at CFO work. We've done cash flows. Mindy's done cash flows for companies here. And then fourth, is the data analytics side, right? So those pieces, again, just want you guys to be aware that we can help service a lot of your needs. And if we don't have those needs in-house, or if you have an issue or an experience that we can't get to, we have in our network, we know of different people that we can refer you to if we cannot do something. But along with those different variations, and I'll just show a couple examples. Many costing projects we've been dealing with clients where they don't know their overhead and costs. As everyone is aware in here, volume is tight, business is tight across a lot of industries. So making sure your company has a handle on their costs, all their input costs, their direct materials, their labor, their overhead, and making sure you're looking at it by customer, by product, by department, by product line. So again, we can look at that stuff for you, help you guys tighten that up and make sure you guys are getting the right prices for the right margins. So again, focused around the costing projects. Secondly, I brought up cash flow forecasting. And we'll talk a lot more about it in our presentation, but the importance of getting a cash flow in front of you, looking at your trends there and looking at what opportunities to pull levers and whatnot there. So importance of cash flow, and if it's tight or if it's positive, what you want to do to make sure you get investment on that return or capital expenditure, et cetera. The third one we've done recently, companies been closing about 15 to 20 days, their financials. Again, to me, it's way too late. We've streamlined their process to do a 5-day close. So the importance of getting 10 days of more real-time data where you can be proactive versus reactive. So streamlining some efficiencies, some process improvements on the financial close side. So now you have the data in your fingertips to make that decision day 5 versus day 20. That's very important. Each day you wait, you lose out on something that you could have reacted to, going forward. And then the fourth one we also do, and some of you guys I've worked with in the room, but the ERP. So you outgrow your ERP system, your financial system, your operations system. We help with a needs and wants assessment, and then we also go from selection to implementation. So again, if you guys need help on that, we can support that. Oops, record. I got 5 minutes, so now I'm going to go into the agenda just a little bit. So, start at 8:30. Next, we're going to turn it over to Mark McKinley, our CEO, and Jeremy, COO, to talk about TRA vision, strategic plan, and succession planning. Then Mindy and I are going to talk about cash flow basics, the importance of it, go a little bit more detail on what you need to look for there. We'll take a quick 10-minute break. And then Andrew James will come up with Kyle. And Kyle, I warned you got 2 minutes that someone told me, make sure Kyle stays on track. 2 minutes there with his SaaS solution, which is software as a service, his o.QBO solution. So I think Kyle, Andrew, and Dustin will be going over that. And then we'll turn it over to the Hummel group to do their risk evaluation and manufacturing with Matt and Tommy. And then we'll break for lunch and break bread for lunch, okay, as a group. From 11:30 to 12, and then after lunch, we'll have Kaitlyn Robison, who's our tax practice lead, coming up with tax updates. So the importance of what you need to be aware of around tax updates, and then followed by information technology and cybersecurity with Jeff Rapp and Travis Strong, and then finally concluding with legacy and progress, the essential guide to exit planning with Paul Weisinger and David Shallenberger. So with that. Thanks for your time. I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy and Mark.
All right. Morning, everyone. So Jeremy and I just flew back from Florida yesterday, and we're blessed to have an office down in Florida. The reason we chose Florida and why it was a good location for us is when we started talking to the firm down there, which is a former employee of Rea Associates that started a firm down there. We go down there and to Sarasota and is it Loveland? I say it wrong all the time. What's the Amish and Mennonite? Pinecraft. We find out that there's a large Amish and Mennonite population down there. So we started an office down there, and we're going down there and looking at other firms and talking to people down there to find out the lay of the land and what's going on. And while we're through this process, we get on a call with Brickwood, and we said, hey, let's go over the presentation real quick, and let's just run you through it and see how that goes. We run through the presentation, and all of a sudden this is the only time I think I've ever seen this. Brickwood just looks at us, and he's silent. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, we missed the mark on this one, bad. And so I love to do this to Jeremy all the time. As I got here, I looked at Jeremy, I said, hey, I rewrote the presentation, so just roll along with me a little bit. So
that was after you got here 12 minutes late.
So
he's
freaking out this morning. So Hey, when we were here last year with you guys, we walked through, I walked through our TRA 3.0 and what we're trying to do in our strategic plan and all that. And when I was talking to Brickwood earlier this week, we looked at that and we said, he said, hey, it's TRA vision, strategic plan, succession planning. And I was thinking about that and I thought, okay, what is he really trying to get to? And what does this group really want to hear about? And what I thought we would focus on, and Jeremy would focus on, would be how to go about making those strategic decisions, understanding when you need to make strategic decisions, and how to put yourself in a position to get there, to make some of those things. So the next thing I was thinking about as I was looking at this, I thought, okay, so we're speaking to a group of manufacturing clients. We got accountants sitting in front of you, and we're going to talk to you about your business. One of the things that you guys may not understand is we look at ourselves almost as if we are manufacturers also. So instead of materials coming in, instead of machines coming in, we have people, we have time, we have knowledge that we got to work on. And working through that process of how do we take that knowledge? How do we take those people? How do we optimize the output that we can have from those things? And how do we go from there? Puts us in a position where our output is almost as if the output that you guys are going to have for us. So our question is, how do we maximize the output that we have for everybody? Well, we have a strategic plan. And when I took over as CEO and started looking at our strategic plan, we sat there and I said, okay, we've been going, let me change that up. We were rolled along for about 75 years inside the firm. And we were a conglomeration of about 13, 14 offices, working well together, but not working like we should. And we had a CEO named Lee Beal. Lee Beal was CEO for about, 10 years or so. And Lee Beal made one decision that I think was more important than anything else that he ever did. Lee looked around and said, hey, we're not operating as effectively and efficiently as we could, so we need to do something different. And Lee started us on the process of saying, okay, how do we look at ourselves and how do we look at ourselves differently? And this is really a key point, is somebody in the organization needed to look around and say, we're not getting what we need out of our organization, not for our people, not for those people's families, not for our clients, not for our communities. And Lee started the process of doing research calls and looking around and saying, okay, who can we bring in to help us? And after, I don't remember, we talked to probably, 5 to 10 different individuals. We settled on an individual named Bob Bunting. And Bob took us through that process of creating TRA 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. And it really made us understand how we needed to change. So then, through that process, here's one of the takeaways I want for you. Nothing stays the same, so you'd better understand the market that's going on. What Lee understood better than anybody else at that time was we needed to change because the market that we were working in was changing for us. And if we didn't speed up the process of change and implementation, we were going to be left behind. And part of that is, you're going to see some of the speakers that are talking, are you able to spot where you're falling behind your competition? Are you able to spot where your people that are in charge of things are not meeting the grade? Are you able to spot when you're trying to make decisions by groupthink versus someone's sole responsibility? So nothing stays the same, you better understand. So I've been CEO for November 1st of this year will be 3 years. When I took over, I looked around, okay? Now, mind you, we had Lee Beal retired. Don McIntosh came in. He ran the firm for about 5 years. So that was TRA version 1. Version 2, we're in the middle of version 3, and I take over. And one other thing about me is I've only worked at Rea Associates. So my viewpoint of the world is actually based on only public accounting. not what you guys are doing on a daily basis. So I come in to the firm, CEO position, and I look around. And I look at Jeremy, who was the COO at the time, still is, doing a fantastic job. And I say, Jeremy, when we look at your team, do you think your team is in a position to succeed? Do we have the right people in the right seats? Are they doing the right things? And are they putting everybody else in a position to succeed? So when you think about that, that would be like if you come into your office or your plant, are we putting people in a position to succeed? Do they have what they need? Do they have the equipment? Do they have the knowledge? Do they have the time to be successful in what they do? We'll get into that in a second. I don't think we're where we needed to be. The other thing I looked around is, and I said to myself, we're not deep enough. We're not deep enough in our industries. So every accounting firm out there will tell you, and when you pull up their website, hey, we have specialization in this, 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 and this. Okay, everybody will have that. And they're gonna have anywhere from 5 to probably 25 different specializations. When you pull that back though, too many firms only have people like me working in manufacturing, meaning we aren't going out into the industries and pulling some of that expertise back into an accounting firm. And so when we got together, we said, okay, we need to get it deeper. We need to get a better understanding of what our clients are doing, how they're doing it, and why they're doing it. And then lastly, as I looked around, when I took over, I said, oh my gosh, there's so much noise going on in the firm. And noise to me is something that takes you off your objective. Noise to me is, hey, something's going on that isn't adding to where we're trying to get to. Could be that it's eliminating profitability, could be that it's eliminating what we're trying to do, where we're trying to go, and we should address that situation. So what I want to do today is talk a little bit about Rea Corporate Partners. How did we identify that? How did we look at that? And how did we change that? I want to talk about our industries and how we develop that expertise so that we could put on a presentation like this and say things to you and be able to have the background to be able to understand what you're doing and how we can do that. And then talk about some of our mistakes and where we've eliminated some of the noise. So Jeremy, tell the group a little bit about yourself and then talk about Rea Corporate Partners.
Sure. And I guess before I get into that a little bit, I want to make one point. Mark kind of touched on it. We're coming into our 4th iteration of our strategic plan now. So we're going to be into 10 years into having the Rea Advantage, what we call our strategic plan. And the one kind of takeaway that I've got probably most from this process is the fact that, well, before we started this whole process, you mentioned back, hiring the consultant Bob to come in and help us. Before we did that, we actually had a strategic plan. We had a beautiful strategic plan that was well-bound and colored and had graphics and everything in it. But this strategic plan never worked for us because it sat on a shelf. And probably most of the partners and certainly the CEO had this strategic plan sitting on their shelf, looking beautiful, collecting dust, but looking great. But the problem with that strategic plan, or the difference between that strategic plan and the one that we have now, that we're about to get into our 4th iteration of, is that we actually have it on the front of our desk. It's on the top of our desk. It's in the backpack I carry around. It's on my phone. It's in possession of every single person. All 450 people in our firm have a copy of that. And we reference it all the time. Every time Mark and I get up and talk in front of the group, we talk about that strategic plan. Our internal communications department references that strategic plan. When we have a board meeting or a leadership meeting, we talk about that strategic plan. And that's how we've been able to execute on that and have 3 different versions and like I said, coming into a 4th now. So to tie that into what you all are doing, you all have business plans. You all have something, I assume, some plan that you want to execute on, something that you want to do next year, the year after, or 6 months from now. My encouragement to you is to make sure that you're looking at that and talking about it. It's not sitting on a shelf collecting dust, looking pretty, that it's actually on the top of your desk. It's on your desktop or your computer. It's wherever you see things every day. So I think that's very important. That's a lesson I've learned through this. So sorry, I took us to a side thing there, Mark, but I think that's something. If you don't remember anything else today, which you will, because there's a lot of great presenters. Remember that part. That's key. Your plan doesn't have to be the best plan in the world, but you have to look at it every day, and you have to have measurables. You got to do a lot of things in that plan. So, all right.
We're going to circle back to that thought at the end.
Okay. Did I steal some of your answer?
No, you did great. Set it up.
All right. So Mark wanted me to talk about myself and kind of what I do at the firm and how that ties into some successes that we've had and some lessons that we've learned. Certainly isn't without lessons along the way. So, Chief Operating Officer at the firm. History of myself, I was actually an intern at Rea Associates. And so for about 10 years, I did the typical work that we did at Rea back then. We're much different now than when I was in practice because we were a very traditional CPA firm back then. I did tax and audit and all different kinds of things. None of them very well, but I did do a lot of those things. And there was a time that I ended up leaving the firm. I was a CFO at a company in the Mentor area, based out of the Mentor area for 3 years. Learned a lot of what some of the folks in this room learned, kind of more how to run a business, what's behind the scenes on the business. And I had the advantage of kind of sitting and watching a bunch of different businesses before I went in to be CFO, so I sort of understood it from that side, and I got to go on the other side of it. I'm looking at Dave Spar over here. He's a guy that worked for us, and he's at Worcester Brush now, and him and I haven't seen each other in a while, but it's cool seeing Dave this morning. And Dave's kind of similar. He's still on the other side, doing a great job at Worcester Brush, but he was able to have those two perspectives also. So I had that, and then about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, I came back to the firm. And there's a whole story to that I won't bore you with, but it was my plan all along to come back and be in the seat that I'm in now at Rea, because I love the firm, I love what we do, and I love what we're all about. And so what I do at the firm is essentially run the business of the firm, and I do that with a whole lot of help. The title of the help would be Rea Corporate Partners. That's what we call our support services at Rea Associates. So those support services are finance and HR, IT, practice growth, project management, internal communications. I hope I didn't miss any of them. But those are the support departments that we have at Rea. And to me, those support departments are they're the infrastructure of our firm. They're what helps the rest of our firm remain productive, service the great clients that we have, retain employees, which is probably a challenge for all of us, right? Retention of good employees. So those departments make sure that all of that happens inside of the firm. And that infrastructure I break down into people, processes, and technology. Those are the three things. And again, our firm may be a little different than some of your firms, but in a professional services firm, it's people and technology. That's what we spend our money on. Every dollar that comes into Rea Associates, 78 cents of that dollar goes out to people one way or the other. And so if you think about the financials of your firms, or your companies, it may be a little bit different, but 78 cents of each dollar goes out to people one way or the other. And then another, it depends on the year, but another 10 to 12 cents goes out on technology. And so that's what we have. We're a knowledge business. And so that's how we run our organization. So investing in people. I just told you 78 cents every dollar comes in. So investing in people to us is the number one thing that we do. Absolutely number one important thing at our firm. And to make sure that we've got the infrastructure in place for our people has been really important. One of the things here that our takeaway number 2, and Mark may have a comment or two on this, don't let wrong decisions linger. Basically take care of those, address them quickly, and move forward.
So just want to take a minute to introduce myself. My name is Kyle Stempel. I'm the current East Central Regional President for Rea Associates. So I currently oversee our New Philly, Millersburg, Worcester, Zanesville, and Marietta offices. As Mark talked to you guys about TRA 4.0, we're doing a little bit of a realignment. That 11-1, my position's going to change, where I'll be the practice lead for our advisory and consulting practices. So retirement planning, our technology and data analytics practice, as well as our SALT, our indirect SALT, state and local income tax side of the business. So as I said, they gave me 2 minutes, but they also gave me 10 minutes for all my disclaimers. I would have to. So as you can tell, as you get the Rea people up here, and we tease each other a lot. We have a lot of fun. The best thing about this firm is our people and our culture. And if you think that that's bad, it's only worse in person. I'm really surprised Mark only teased me about one thing and didn't talk about the hoodies I like to wear all the time. I said, you can notice really quickly if you look around at the Rea people who came from Cleveland and Columbus and who came from the East Central region. So it's really easy. So notice when they're speaking, you'll be able to tell very easily. I'm really excited about this next presentation and what Andrew's going to show you. I've spent the last several years doing a lot of research calls with clients and talking to them about what type of data are they using to make business decisions. And this probably won't surprise most of you. A lot of them use very little data to make decisions. And if they use data, a lot of time the data is out of date, it's not current. Or the bigger issue that I'm seeing that I think this product and solution provides more than anything, is I see too many clients spending 80% of their time gathering the data and only 20% of their time utilizing the data. And I think we need to switch that. So as I said before, I've spent a lot of time, I've looked at a lot of different software solutions, I've looked at a lot of different things, but they were missing something. And I think we were able to encompass a lot of that. So a little disclaimer here. As soon as you hear or see it's QBO, some of you may say, hey, we don't use QBO. I'm going to stop listening, or I'm going to look at my phone. What I want you to understand that, yes, we're showing you this in QBO, but this data and these type of dashboards are available in any one of your ERP systems that you guys have. And as much as you spend on those ERP systems, those of you that have one and have gone through that, just out of the box working, you don't get this. This is next level. This is the next level stuff that you got to make sure that you get after the integration. So for those of you, if you don't use QBO, pay attention to this because you could have this stuff at your fingertips as well on a day-to-day basis. Just a little bit, we started our data analytics team in October of 2023 with hiring Andrew James here. And shortly thereafter, we ended up hiring Brad Harvey and Ryan Bliss and added those two individuals to our team. And we're currently looking for a couple other individuals. One of the things that as I get older, the joke in public accounting was if you want an old guy to retire, you just change the software or technology. So I hate to say that because some of you may look at me like I'm young. Some of you may know I'm not. But I tell you, the technology, staying on top of it on a day-to-day basis, and then not only that, the number of technologies that I feel like we need to know in our business is pretty demanding. So I really love this technology stuff, but we were able to go out and find somebody a lot smarter than me to execute it. So I'm going to turn this over to Andrew James. And one of the things I'll say about this group, if you have something that you're doing and it's taking you a decent amount of time, he can probably streamline it with technology. Some of the stuff he's been able to do, it's kind of, he's our data geek. And does some really cool stuff, and it's pretty amazing what our team and Andrew are able to do. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrew.
Thanks, Kyle. I actually just make up technologies from time to time just to throw a curveball at Kyle. Like, oh, have you heard of this new technology? And he's like, oh, yeah, that's awesome. I'm like, dude, that doesn't even exist. So really just trying to keep him on his toes as we go through everything. Before I get into the main presentation and kind of show the demo of the dashboard that we're going to present today, how many people are Disney lovers here? All right, we got a couple. Has anybody tried to take a young toddler to Disney when it's 90 degrees outside? Okay, so you guys have all felt my pain. So this last week, we took our son to Disney. 90 degrees, hurricane going on, a lot of different things happening. And the best way that I could frame it up was it's magical chaos. So our kids get the magical aspects of it, right? So they get to see their characters, they get to see the parades, they're all happy, they're giddy. Parents, we get to see the chaos part of it, right? I have to push a stroller for 7 miles as I'm walking through. I have to have this diaper bag on me. For whatever reason, the son won't ride in the stroller and I have to carry him, right? My back's hurting, I'm tired. So what I really think of when we went to Disney is how is that magical chaos and how does Disney help to streamline it to make it easier for our parents? And what I'm going to do is kind of play this into what we're trying to do as a data analytics team to make it easier for you as well. Buzz Lightyear fans? Anybody? Anybody? All right, Buzz Lightyear almost caused a meltdown within my family, to be honest with you. So it's day 2, it's like 6 o'clock at night. My son's like screaming, I want to see Buzz Lightyear. So my wife looks at him and says, you need to get a diaper change first, you need to get some food, and then we'll go see Buzz. Soon as those words come out of our mouth, he's jumping up and down, right? He's super excited. We get a ping on our phone, thunderstorms are rolling in off the hurricane coming. So we have an hour before it's just going to monsoon rain at Disney. So I look at my wife, I'm like, we're stuck. Like, I don't know what we're going to do. We better show this son Buzz Lightyear or he's not going to be happy with us. We got to figure this out. So what we were able to do is use data to make decisions very, very quickly to be able to get everything done that we needed to get done and not get monsooned on from the rainstorms and not get those 60-mile-per-hour winds. Disney does an exceptional job of giving you data at the palm of your hand. So as soon as I got that alert that the rain was coming, I said, okay, where's Buzz Lightyear? Where's the closest restroom? And where can I order takeout food all at once? Within 5 minutes, I had it all figured out and had us routed to go see Buzz Lightyear. Thankfully, we made it back to the car. We didn't get monsooned on that day. But the next day at Animal Kingdom, I screwed up and told my wife the storm wasn't coming and we got rained on. So this is part of it. So what we're trying to do here at Rea is give you that data, right? How do you get something on your phone to say, here's how my business is doing, here's where we're at for the month, or here's where we're at for the year, and how do we make strategic decisions based on that data? So we want to become that Disney app for all of you in this room as our clients. So a lot of people are still a little hesitant on dashboards. Why do I need a dashboard? Why do you want me to use a dashboard? And it kind of goes back to some of the things that Kyle had mentioned. There's a lot of time and effort of gathering data, pulling it from your system, throwing it into an Excel file, making a pretty graph, sending it out to your team. And by the time that data gets out, it's already stale. Then you're going through that process again the next month, and you kind of keep living in this. What we're able to do is to pull your data from your systems in a real-time fashion. So every 2 hours throughout the day, we're pulling the data and we're giving you that data in the palm of your hand. You're able to see it on your phones. You're able to see it on your desktops. We can integrate it into Teams. We can integrate it to other places. And what it allows you to do is have an easy-to-digest dashboard that you can click, get into your details, and make business decisions more real time. So what we've done over this past year is said, we know dashboards are powerful. We know we want to get it into the hands of our clients. So how do we develop something that we can kind of mass produce and get it out in as many hands as we can all at once? And that is ultimately how the idea to create a QuickBooks Online dashboard came about and what I'm going to show you today. How many people in here are using QuickBooks Desktop or QuickBooks Online? So this will be interesting. So we saw probably like 30 hands or so raise up. How many people like the reporting out of any of those systems? Okay, we have a couple. I'd say that's more than usually what I see. So I'm happy that there's a couple people that like it because a lot of our clients are in there. A lot of our clients are trying to get information out. How many people are using Business Central today? Mike is. I was trying to get you more people for your group, Mike, so I figured I'd ask the question. What about like a Sage product? Anybody using Sage? NetSuite? Okay, a couple NetSuite. So all these products pretty much work the same way. We can go in, we can grab that data. What I always tell clients is a customer table is a customer table. An invoice has the same amount of fields on it, no matter if it's in QuickBooks or if it's in NetSuite or if it's in Sage. Any of these systems, what you're going to see here today, we can do in those systems as well. So what I'm going to do is jump into what this dashboard is going to look like. You guys are going to be one of maybe 20 people that have seen this so far. So you guys are on the cutting edge of what we're going to roll out here at Rea. But what we're going to do is we're going to actually offer this to our clients as a SaaS solution. So software as a service. So what you'll be able to do is sign up for a monthly subscription fee. We'll do all of your licensing for you. We'll do all of the deploying of data. We'll maintain the environment, all your security and things like that. And you'll be able to access this data. and get your information in more real time. How many people in here have actually used Power BI before or know what Power BI is? Like a couple. What's that? How'd it go? Okay. Well, we're here to solve your problems for today. So Power BI is what we're going to ultimately use to display this information for you. For people that don't know what Power BI is, it's a data visualization tool made by Microsoft. Microsoft has pumped tons of money into this tool. They continue to invest as part of their kind of fabric platform that they rolled out. And it's honestly what we use internally here today at Rea. What I tell people is if you take Excel, put it on steroids, and get all the functionality of PowerPoint, that's ultimately what Power BI is. So we can crunch hundreds of millions of rows of data. We can aggregate that data, give it to you in nice, pretty pictures where you can drill into it, you can zoom into your information, and it works very, very quickly. So you don't run into those limitations that you see today in Excel of, hey, I have 1 million rows of data, or I have 500,000 rows of data, and my Excel was crashing over and over again. This first page here that you're going to see, and I do apologize on these TVs, things are very, very small, so I'm going to do my best to zoom in and kind of jump around here. But what this is it's going to be a splash screen. So each one of those little squares that you have are going to be different screens within the dashboard that you can access. To try to make that information easy to understand what you're looking at, we kind of put blurbs. I know it's a paragraph in here, but ultimately what you're going to find on that page so you know what pages to go to get out your information. What's nice about this is any of this information I can click and it takes me directly to that page. So I'm going to try to really zoom in on this one so we can see it. So on the left-hand side of all of our pages, we're going to let you slice and dice the data. So if you're on an accrual method, if you're on a cash method, you can select either one of those. If you've been in QuickBooks Online for 20 years, you're going to have 20 years of information out there. You can go back to 1995 because you want to see what you paid in payroll. We'll give you access to that. We're not here to judge. You can also select all of your months, so select whatever month you want to look at. And then for anybody that's actually using budgets in QuickBooks, you can select budget and all your comparison points will be against a budget. But if you don't use a budget, then we have prior years, so you can always compare back to prior years. So as you just heard Ryan and Mindy talk a little bit ago, you always want to have some type of comparison point to see how you're doing. So we're at least going to give you a prior year comparison point to be able to compare your data. But if you have budgets, you do any type of forecasting within QuickBooks Online, we'll pull out all that information and give that to you as a comparison point as well. So what I tell people is on this main page right here, is it's really a splash screen to say, if I have 5 minutes to understand what is going on in my month, how do I get the information that I need? So on this page, what we're going to do is just have some high-level metrics. And all this data is dummy data, so when you look at it, you might be like, hey, this doesn't make a lot of sense. It's a typical QuickBooks product, right? They're going to give you bad data, and it's hard to make sense of it, but we're working through that. So what you can see here is kind of your profit and loss. So you're going to get your high-level revenue, your gross profit, your profit margin, and your net income. You're also going to get to see that against the comparison period. So since I have prior year selected, I can see all my comparison points there and then see if it's up and down versus the previous year. The other things that we're going to do here is just give you some high level balance sheet metrics so you can ultimately see where your cash is at, where your cash was compared to the previous year or your budget, accounts receivable, accounts payable, things like that. So just a quick way of, hey, I only have 5 minutes. What's my month looking like? I can pull this page up and get that information very, very quickly. If I want to go to a little bit, actually, let me hit one more thing on here. If I scroll down here at the bottom, I can see my top customers for the month. So it's going to give me each customer's name. It's going to give me the amount of revenue from those customers. And then also I'm going to get a trended chart over here on my right-hand side. That's going to show you ultimately your revenue by month. And then when you hover over it, it's going to give you your top customers as well. So it's almost like a view within a view to be able to say, hey, what's my revenue doing? And if I just want a little bit more grain of that revenue, I can hover over it and see each one of my customers and the amount of revenue from them. But if I want to get into kind of that next layer down and I say, hey, that's great, I see how my month is doing, but really how's my year trending? On this next page, we're going to be able to get those same type of slicers and that same type of information that we saw from the first page, but now over our entire fiscal year. So we can see things such as our revenue and how it's trending by month. We can see our gross profit, our net income, and then we can compare those back to our budget or back to our prior year as well. So these first 2 pages are really, how do we give you those high-level views so that you can get your information very, very quickly? And if you see something that doesn't look right, reach out to your accountant, dig into QuickBooks, or kind of do any follow-ups that you may need to do. The other good thing about using these dashboards and having more of your real-time data is, as Mindy and Ryan talked about, accelerating close processes and things like that, you can start to see things that are issues throughout the month and fix them way before you ever get to month end. So I know that when I was a controller before, our reporting wasn't the greatest. So on like the 28th of every month, I'd run a bunch of reports. Then I'm like, here's the 30 journal entries I have to go book to fix stuff. That kind of goes out the window now with more of this real-time data, more of this exception-based reporting, because you're getting that in your face very, very quickly. You can say, hey, I need to reclassify this expense, or hey, I need to reclassify this revenue, and you can fix it so that then by the time you get to month end, you have less manual journal entries or less reclasses that ultimately you have to book. So these 2, super high level, like I said, but where I think the real power of Power BI comes into is when we start to look at the P&L and the balance sheet. So on a P&L perspective, we can take this as low, as granular as you want, or as high up as you want. So if I just want total revenue, total expense, I can zoom up really quickly. I can see what my net income is for the month. So in this case, it's $1,700, making tons of money. At least we're profitable, so that's a huge win. But if I really want to, I can then also click buttons and drill down as low as I want to, all the way down into a natural account level. So then I can see everything in my P&L with a click of a button. We went from super high level to blown down to the lowest level. What's also nice about this is if you think about from a QuickBooks perspective and getting into your nitty-gritty details of what's in an account, you might have to log into 3 or 4 different screens or click into 3 or 4 different reports to actually get into that transactional level. What we've been able to do is as soon as you click something over here on the right-hand side, it's actually going to blow down all of those transactions for you. So if I had $1,500 of revenue come in for the month, I can click it and I can see all $1,500 of revenue that came in by my customer, by the invoice number, by the amount. What's also nice is in here we have different slicers where you can look at anything from a year-to-date perspective, a month-to-date, or a quarter-to-date perspective. So you don't have to go run a separate report or go into another screen like you would on QuickBooks. I can quickly toggle these buttons and I can look at a month-to-date view, a year-to-date view, or a quarter-to-date view. That also updates all of the details on the right-hand side. So if you're on year-to-date, then you're going to see your year-to-date revenue for every account. Or if you're on month-to-date, you're only going to see that month selected. So these are some of the enhancements that you get from being able to use a dashboard versus having to click into 3 or 4 different screens from a QuickBooks Online perspective. If I jump over here to the balance sheet, I always tell people the balance sheet is super important, but it's also the most boring thing that you ever look at. So we tried to spice it up as much as we could. So the same view that you have from a P&L, you're going to get all of your different accounts here. But where we're trying to kind of build out just some knowledge externally, and even when our teams are talking to clients, is how do you start to look at cash conversion cycle, right? So how do you start to look at from the time my raw material comes in the door to the time that I actually get paid from my customer, how many days does it actually take? How are you comparing versus a year ago, a month ago, 12 months ago? And are you actually flipping your raw materials into cash quicker than what you were before, or is it taking you longer? So this gets back into the conversations that we just had about customers extending payment terms. That's ultimately going to impact your cash conversion cycle. You're not going to get paid as quickly, and now you are having to use some type of borrowing mechanism or some other mechanism to do your cash flow. So we build in kind of what those trends are by month, and it's always going to look at your trailing 12 months to give you an accurate cash conversion cycle. The other thing that we've done in here is just kind of added some efficiency metrics. So looking at your working capital, your cash ratio, and your debt to equity ratio. So as we've talked down the road, Maybe we do some more stuff around covenants. If people have bank covenants, we build something automatically in there for that. So you kind of have those details. Or if there's anything else that people want to track from a KPI perspective, I think this is probably going to be the page that gets blown out the most as we get this into more users' hands and start to build out more information on it. The other thing that we've talked to clients about is kind of going back to the P&L is maybe building in some EBITDA calculations and things like that. So those are all future enhancements that we're looking to eventually bring into the dashboard as well. I feel like I'm still in all Brickwood's and Mindy's thunder here, and because now we're on cash flow, so we're just following up with everything they had. This was something that kind of as we sat down and originally talked about it, this wasn't in my scope. I didn't do a lot with cash flows in my previous life, didn't really look at it a lot. But Andrew Geiser was one of the ones that kind of spearheaded this, is your cash goes in and out, and you really have no idea where your cash necessarily goes, right? You have these buckets that Mindy and Ryan talked about operating activities and investing activities, but what does that really mean? So what we've done is actually build out a cash flow that you can drill into. So I can actually see my changes in accounts payable for the month here. And then I can see all my puts and takes of accounts payable. So ultimately, what did I pay out in accounts payable? What new accounts payable got generated? So if you're curious on where your cash is going, you can see those changes in your cash on a monthly basis, yearly basis, however you maybe want to slice and dice that data. So all at the click of a button, you can get into that nitty-gritty details of that information. And then we have some cash flow timelines here to kind of just show you month over month the changes in those balances, if it's accounts payable, accounts receivable, whatever you maybe have selected up there in the top left-hand corner. The last two pages in here, I think a lot of people will use them, but they're pretty basic for the most part. So we have an accounts receivable aging report and an accounts payable aging report. So as before, you still have your slicers over here on the left-hand side. You can look at anything that's 1 to 30 days past due, 30 to 60, 60 to 90, so kind of what you'd see in your normal aging reports. You also have a bar chart out here telling you your dollar amount by each one of those buckets. So if I click on just 1 to 30 days past due, I now get a view of all my different vendors that are 1 to 30 days. And then I can also see all the transactions that are in that 1 to 30 day bucket. If I would just rather look at something by vendor, I can just select that vendor as well, and it'll give me all the transactions, customer number, customer name, days past due for that vendor. So you can quickly slice and dice to kind of get to which invoices haven't been paid and get into those details. And the accounts payable is pretty much the same thing, just from an accounts payable perspective. So you can still see your days past due buckets. You can click into it by your vendors, see the information, see the invoice descriptions, all that same stuff that you saw from an accounts receivable perspective. And since Kyle said I am a data nerd, and I always, no matter how many dashboards I build out, I still want to get into the nitty-gritty details of the data. One of the things that we provided here on this last page is truly just all the details of your transactions. So if you've ever tried to go into QuickBooks Online and run like a general ledger transactions report, or even done it on QuickBooks Desktop, it takes a long time to populate. Here we have that for you. So all this information at any point in time, you can export into Excel. We give you that opportunity to do that, and then you can slice and dice data or manipulate data how you see fit. So in all of our dashboards, we always kind of give you that data details page where you can get all of the raw data if you want to use it in some way, shape, or form. So for people that have used Power BI, have you seen a lot of dashboards like this? Does this kind of give you more details than maybe what you've seen in the past? Or what are some thoughts on either Power BI or what you've seen here today? Not everybody at once. Hold up 1 second, that'll bring you.
I was just curious, is this kind of sold as a standard package and then it's customized to the client level, or is every client's dashboard different?
Yeah, so our kind of default out of the box is going to be what you see here. But then we will actually work with the clients for any customizations that they want to pull into the dashboard. And what we'll do is we'll slightly tweak the monthly subscription fees depending on how big those customizations are. Like if it's super complex, obviously monthly fee will go up. If it's something basic, then it won't go up by very much.
Can the views of these be permission-based so some of the details aren't shared to everybody?
Yeah, so what we can actually do is kind of how Power BI works as a whole is almost works like a SharePoint or kind of like a shared drive that you have on your computer. So what we can do is we can actually restrict access at a dashboard level, or we can restrict access at a workspace level. So it kind of in Mike's question there of can you have different views? What we can do is if you don't want someone to be able to drill into every account, we'll lock down their view and only give them access to that dashboard. So those capabilities based on, hey, like in some of my previous lives, we maybe didn't want sales to see all of our COGS information down to the nitty gritty in case they left. So we would roll everything up. COGS would just kind of come through at one total number and they couldn't see any details. And we'd set up special rules so those people couldn't see that information. I'll make sure you get a workout, Cody.
Hi, Andrew. So I guess this is a two-parter. One, I realize this so I spent a lot of time on the operational side of the business. Are you seeing this with inventory analysis? And you're seeing, I assume, as much as the accounting side?
Yeah, I would say probably the top 4 dashboards that we see is a sales dashboard, a P&L dashboard, an open orders dashboard, and some type of inventory management dashboard. So those are kind of the 4 things that we see constantly in every client that we go into that they want.
Because I think where I see a lot of manual labor going into something where I could see a lot of automation, cutting through. Like longer term, do you see AI being implemented into this to where, we open up our computer and ask it, is there a problem in inventory? And it's popping up and explaining, hey, I think this is a problem. Are you starting to see that with the software?
So technically in Power BI right now, you can do that. It's not very good. So they already have chat boxes where I can come in and say, hey, what are my top 5 customers in July? I can type that in and it'll actually pop up a box and show me my top 5 customers in July. So they're kind of getting to the point where you have to kind of train it a little bit, because let's say if you use like sales and revenue and maybe some other acronym, you pretty much have to program all those acronyms right now for it to make sense. So that's where AI is going to really step into this, is they'll be able to say, I know sales is the same thing as revenue. I know like profit's the same thing as margin, right? Or something like that. So AI is going to come into it, and you're going to have a chat box in there just like you would in Chat GPT, where you type in your question and then it's going to highlight that information for you. There was actually a report out of Gartner, I think it was last year, where they said that AI would be able to pretty much create like 75% of your narratives and dashboards to tell you what's going on. They said that would happen within the next 5 years. So we're down to 4 years now, but yeah, I think it's coming pretty quickly here. Any other questions just on Power BI, dashboards, this one in particular? So no one's asked what the cost is yet? I was hoping people were excited. I was going to say $1 million, but that's a good monthly subscription fee. So what we have decided from a monthly subscription fee here is it's going to start at $500 per month, obviously depending on customizations, other things that we have to build in or pull data sets into. It could go up from there. But ultimately what that's going to get you is we're going to pull all the data, we're going to do all the storage data, we're going to do all the backup of data. We're also going to provide you 2 monthly Power BI Pro licenses. If you need additional ones from that perspective, we can do that for an increased fee as well, because it's a pretty straightforward fee from a Power BI Pro license. And then every 6 months, we're looking at doing some type of enhancements to this. So what we'll start to do is send out questionnaires or have webinars to say, hey, what aren't you seeing in here? What's not working for you? What do you want to be added? And we'll go through like a 6-month refresh cycle, where as we kind of refresh it, we'll be able to push that out to everybody so everybody can get some of those benefits. So we decide EBITDA is a top priority, we'll build an EBITDA, push that out to everybody, and then train on how to look at that or how to make sure QuickBooks is configured correctly to do an EBITDA calculation. The other good thing about this is, if you have some questions, you can go ahead, Cody. The other great thing about this, and then I'll pop into your question, is all this is available on your phone. So the same dashboard that you just saw, I have it directly on my phone. I can do all the drilling capabilities and get onto all the same nitty-gritty details on my phone from anywhere that I want to be. So Kyle always told me when he first was doing my interviews and brought me in, he goes, my goal is to sit on a beach, drink a beer, and know how my business is performing. We are very, very close to that of you have it on your mobile iPad, you have it on your mobile device, you can have your cocktail and see how your business is performing from anywhere.
Yeah, so this would be available for anyone using QuickBooks Online,
Yep.
but not connected to any desktop version, correct?
Yeah, so we have some other options to do a desktop version as well. And so with those, we actually have to sit down and talk with the client because it's a little bit more labor intensive to get set up, but we can do it with QuickBooks Desktop as well.
And this is a product produced by Rea & Associates and owned by Rea,
Yep.
correct?
Yep, that is correct. Yep.
And would work with anyone that has QuickBooks Online.
Yep. Yeah, so ultimately the process from a client perspective is super easy. If we already have access to your QuickBooks Online account from a Rea & Associates perspective, then we can go ahead and flip the switch and start pulling data into our system. So if we don't have access already to your QuickBooks Online, that would be something that we'd request for you to set us up, and then we're able to access that information and pull it and load it and stay at the dashboard for you. And then obviously with any new product, we're going to go through a full-blown training with you. We're going to walk you through what your data is showing. We're going to do all the data validations and get you used to the product when it's time to go live with it. Any other questions? So a lot of the people in this room from a Rea perspective actually helped us to develop this product. I think we went through about 4 or 5 different iterations of it to kind of get it to the point that you saw here today. So I just want to thank all of them because they spent hours, you know, when they could have been doing tax returns or audits or whatever else, helping us to develop this. So we did spend a lot of time internally just coming up with a great solution. And then ultimately, we're looking forward to all the feedback that our clients have on how we can continue to make it better and grow this thing over time. QuickBooks Online is going to be kind of the first iteration. What we're looking to do after that is kind of why I had people raise their hands of Business Central and Sage, or what other softwares can we do this for you? So if you don't want to set up a data warehouse, you don't want to manage your data, but you want all of the power of dashboards, how do we come in, build that custom solution for you? We can do all the storage, we can make sure everything's working, and do other SaaS solutions beside QuickBooks Online. But this was just the first one that we started with to kind of get off the ground with this solution going forward.
Andrew, talk a little bit about how this is just bolted onto QuickBooks from a standpoint. Is there risk that this could mess up somebody's QuickBooks file, anything like that? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so from a QuickBooks perspective, this is a read-only feed. We're not going in there making any changes. We're not updating anything. We're just directly pulling data out of QuickBooks Online. QuickBooks Online has what they call an API, and that is a way for us to connect to their cloud software and pull that data down. So I think we spent like a month and a half just writing code to be able to actually go pull that data, pull it down, and then what we're doing is we're storing that in Azure from a database perspective, and then Power BI is sitting on top of that information and refreshing it and pulling it all. So don't have to worry about us messing up your files. You don't have to worry about us ever writing back to your QuickBooks Online account. Everything is a read-only direct pull into our software. And then if for some reason you decide, hey, you don't want this service anymore, we wipe the database, we clean it all out, and we don't have your data anymore after that. Or if you try to push our terms 100 days like some clients are, you know, we'll wipe it out. So, but any other questions? Dustin, Andrew, I know you guys were heavily involved in this. Anything that you guys want to add?
The only thing I would say is talking about having it on your phone from a mobile app standpoint. So we have an internal dashboard that's more operational focused. So think inventory. It's our workflow of tax returns and tax work that we got to get out the door. So I was literally just looking at it while I was sitting here, seeing once how many we have left to get done here. For those that know, we have a 10/15 deadline coming up. So Andrew and his team set it up so we can slice and dice it. I can see, you know, how many returns certain people have. Do they need help so we can readjust where they go? Different people that are in charge of clients, how many do they have? Do they need help getting information in? Anything like that. So, we are there from the standpoint of being able to pull them up on our phones, download the Power BI app, and be able to see once what's going on within your business. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, what the good thing is, and I didn't bring this, I really did do a great job introducing myself, but I'm technically over our internal and external data analytics teams. So there's a lot of great stuff. As we said earlier, we're kind of like a manufacturer that we get a pilot internally, and then how do we kind of spin that out to our clients? So that's one of the great things about being in my role is I can almost pilot a lot of different things, see what takes off within Rea, and then give that as solutions out to our clients where they see those benefits as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dustin to close out. The only thing I will add, if anybody does want to play around with the dashboard that we just saw, this QR code will actually take you directly to it on your phones, and you can do all the points and clicks and see the dashboard that we just displayed. Yeah.
Real quick, Andrew just asked me to come up here. My name's Dustin Raber, for any of you that don't know me. I'm out of the Worcester office. Soon here, November 1st, like Kyle mentioned, I'll be taking over an area of our business, the family and emerging business. So a lot of what Andrew's showing impacts a lot of the clients that we work with. I have a couple, Yoda Lumber, that I've worked with over the years that uses it, along with what kind of stemmed this is when Andrew got in, we tried one and learned a lot from it. And so Andrew just asked me real quickly to talk a little bit about that. And, so essentially, meeting with clients monthly or quarterly, it really elevated those conversations. Andrew may have mentioned it. One source of truth is what Andrew always says. Now when we get into meetings, we don't have the sales team fighting with the finance team about whose number's right, where did this data come from, how do we get there? It just makes your meetings more impactful. Also, don't wait until your data's good. That's one thing Andrew Geiser and I learned internally as we were building that one that he just talked about for our tax returns. We always had the perception you had to have good data to do this. Let your data tell you where your problems are. There's no better way than seeing it in this dashboard. Also, focus your teams on what to look at. What we see is what Andrew's showing you, I would say, is just the taste of the apple, or the first bite of the apple, I would say. Operations, I heard, some other things. It really starts to drive, how can I use this in my business? What can I do differently? So we see it across the board. Starts to change the presentation of your data. And so I just see people using it more strategically, looking forward, letting that data come in quickly, and how do we use it? And last thing I would say is just be careful, paralysis by analysis. You're going to have all this new data. Speaking personally, with the dashboard he put up, I think I had 20 different versions, ribbons sitting there. I'm down to 5 again. Bob at Yoder Lumber told me it was going to happen. It's the natural evolution. You get excited. You see all these different ways to look at stuff. It'll slow you down. So just be careful. And so I would recommend, as you guys are looking at this, get your Rea representative or get Andrew out there, talk through it, have them help lead those conversations, because we've been doing this for a while now, and it can just help you keep things moving, and so you don't get stagnant, because it's a great tool. It's dangerous though also. And so I would just recommend at least talking to Andrew, even if you have one available already that you have set up. He's a great way to look at things. He's got an accounting background, and he knows the data side. So for people from Holmes and Wayne County, I'd say he knows Pennsylvania Dutch and English. So he can talk between the two. And so just thank you again for giving us this time. I know it's QuickBooks focused, but just don't forget, like Kyle said, this can attach to any software. It can pull your payroll, your financial, your operation software all together and get the data. So that was my last piece. I just wanted to recommend to everyone.
Any final questions before I turn it over to the Hummel group here for their next presentation? All right. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Brookwood had them. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. How's it going? Yeah, so I was really excited to come and be here today with you guys because it's not often that a couple of insurance guys show up to any kind of presentation, and we are the least, or the most driest subject, the least riveting, but I think we have a new rival that's with us today. Ray, we love you guys. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name's Tommy Brenner. With the Hummel Group, I'm a business risk advisor and also lead our alternative risk initiatives with the group. And we're excited to share a little bit about the subject that we have here today. So with that, Matt Yost is going to join me here in a moment. And we're going to split this up so you don't have the same person that's going to present to you the whole time. But as we go through this, we've got one goal. The goal is to do this, to educate you, to empower you, to make informed business decisions regarding your risk management and insurance strategy. It's that simple. So we're here to provide that education and to provide something of value that you can walk away from and say, hey, that was helpful. That's a good nugget that I can take away. So here's how we're going to do that. A few ways. Number one, we're going to view everything through the lens of the relevance to manufacturers. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to provide relatable examples of business disruptions where risk management and insurance fills a void. The third thing that we're going to do is we're going to help equip you with the knowledge, as I had referenced before, so that not only are you aware of what these things are, but also some execution strategies. And then the final thing is we are going to integrate best practices throughout all of this. And I will make it abundantly clear when those best practices are, which would be an opportunity to jot down a couple of notes. We anticipate these two things as part of it. Number one, a lot of this is going to be a reminder or a refresher of things that you already know. But we also are aware that some of this might be brand new information to you, and as part of that process, we want to make sure that we're providing the encouragement so that not only do you take this knowledge, absorb it, and toss it into a notebook that sits on the back shelf, similar to the examples we heard before, but you actually put it into an execution strategy. Fair enough? All right, so we're going to go through and just talk about a couple of emerging risks as a part of this process. And as we work through it, here are your agenda items. So let's go ahead and start with the emerging risks. Number one, I want to bring up climate change. So I'm not talking about the political reference here, but I think that all of us can look at what we've experienced here recently and say that climate is different. We're experiencing storms not only in volume, but in magnitude that we're probably not used to. And there's a few disruptors that go along with that. In case you didn't know that the Hurricane Helene that just went through here, it was a Category 4 hurricane. It went 500 miles inland and damaged all the way from the Big Bend of Florida all the way up into, as everyone has seen, western part of North Carolina, eastern part of Tennessee. Very unique and something that we haven't often seen before as it relates to the amount of damage that's been caused. Millions and millions of folks have been impacted by this, including businesses. Of course, creating those types of disruptions and planning accordingly is important. So those disruptions, of course, could be on property rates, could be on the selection of a location for expansion if there's a consideration of where these weather patterns have impacted places, and then beyond that, impact to suppliers and customers. So here's your best practice, just along with the climate change element. Familiarize yourself with weather patterns, as odd as that sounds. Be aware of where these weather patterns are most impactful. And make sure that you're intentional about certain building protections and ensure that your current property insurance directly reflects your business profile. So climate change is the first of four emerging risks that we're going to talk about. The second one is this is cyber threats. So you're going to hear a bit more on this in a little while from some of the Rea folks, but I want to read this to you because I think that this is very interesting. According to Cybercrime Magazine, Cybersecurity Ventures expects that global cybercrime is expected to grow by 15% annually over the next 2 years, reaching $9.5 trillion and $10.5 trillion by 2025, up from $3 trillion in 2015. That's trillion with a T. This represents the greatest transfer of economic wealth in history, risks the incentives for innovation and investment, and is exponentially larger than the damage inflicted from natural disasters in a year, and will be more profitable than the global trade of all major illegal drugs combined. If we were to take the amount of financial loss that's been experienced through cybercrime, it would create the third largest economy in the world behind only US and China. Think about that impact. As part of that, this is something that not only you as business leaders need to know, but your employees need to know about it too. We've seen an uptick in simulated emails, phishing attacks, malware, ransomware, all things that especially those that are dealing in the financial aspect of the business are probably seeing regularly and are those who are being targeted. So cybercrime and cyber threats was a big issue, continues to be a big issue, and something that we anticipate going forward. Here's your best practice. Complete a cyber liability application. Who loves filling out applications? The answer is no one, but I would encourage you to do it, and here's why. There are certain insurance companies out there that provide cyber liability insurance, and as part of that process, they are going to perform what we call a simulated attack. So they're going to go into your system, they're going to try to break it, but do it in a simulated or sandbox format. With that, they're going to create what's called a systems vulnerability report, which is going to show you where all of the soft spots are in your IT platform. It costs nothing. And then from there, if you decide that it's a relevant topic to continue the pursuit of cyber liability insurance, fine. If not, at least you know where the soft spots are. And I've often heard it said that if you can qualify for cyber liability insurance via the application that they provide, you probably don't need to buy it. Next one on here is going to be third-party litigation funding. How many of you are familiar with this term? Heard it in passing, maybe? Okay, so new topic. I want to give you a definition first. So it is the financial arrangement between a third-party investor or a group of investors that provides contributions to a plaintiff in exchange for a share of the successful settlement or judgment. The interesting part about this is it's currently completely unregulated in the United States, and it's assisted with what we refer to as multiple nuclear verdicts or very, very large claims payouts. And specific to product liability and commercial auto lawsuits, those are the two areas of the greatest impact. So here's your best practice with this third-party litigation funding. Number one, just be aware that product liability as manufacturers, that is one of the primary targets as it relates to this third-party litigation funding. And then the second, of course, is the commercial auto claims as being a primary attractor. So third-party litigation funding. And then finally, supply chain vulnerability. So I don't have to tell you what the impact was of 2020 and 2021 from a supply chain access perspective, but that certainly was a wake-up call for us and many others. But we also threw in the idea of climate change with some of those weather patterns, supply chain shortages or disputes that have gone on. I'm curious if you followed what's gone on with the ports on the eastern seaboard and then wrapping around Florida into Texas. It's been resolved, but as part of those issues, if we don't have access to materials that come from an international source, could be a disruptor. Matt's going to talk about that here in a little bit as well. We also recognize that many of these disruptions are outside of your control, so here's your best practice. Build a roster of suppliers that understand and can fulfill your needs. Build a roster. Share your product specifications with these suppliers and offer updates annually. Of course, ensure that there's protections for any proprietary information that goes with that. And the goal is to have a fortified backup plan in the event that accessibility to materials or supplies are compromised. I heard a presentation from a gentleman named Dan Rooney here, it's probably been 8 or 9 months ago. He started the organization Folds of Honor. He was a Top Gun pilot, and he said this, and I love this. He says, be ready so you can stay ready. So build the plan now, fortify that plan so that you can be prepared if something were to present itself in the form of a disruption. So I'm going to go ahead and step aside. I'll turn this over to Matt to dive into some particulars.
Okay, thank you, Tommy. Am I on? Can you hear this? Okay. And I want to thank the folks at Rea as well for inviting us. My name is Matt Yost. I serve as the Chief Growth Officer for Hummel. I work out of our Worcester office. Just as a brief background, I've been in the insurance industry for about 24 years now. Actually started just up north at Westfield Insurance as a field underwriter, and after about 4.5 years realized that large corporate life was not for me. So I wanted to be part of a smaller business, and I joined Hummel. as a commercial insurance advisor and worked in that capacity for a while, but for the past 4 years have overseen anyone in a sales capacity or advisory capacity in our organization, work on recruiting, mergers and acquisitions, really anything that helps move our organization forward from a growth standpoint. Now, when you've got some folks from Hummel up here and we're talking about risk, you may think that our solution to that is to sell you insurance, provide insurance. And that's not necessarily the case. Certainly, insurance placement is a portion of your risk management program. But really what we want to do first is we want to help identify risk. So once you identify the risk facing your organization, then you'll be able to decide if you want to assume them, if you want to avoid them, or if you want to transfer them. Certainly the placement of insurance plays a part in the transfer. But really what I tell a lot of my clients is I'm trying to sell you less insurance, or maybe more accurately, less expensive insurance because of the policies, the procedures, the risk mitigation techniques you put in place. So when we talk about identifying, and once you evaluate the risk facing your company, we try to really look at 3 different buckets of risk. And no, Tommy already moved it forward for me. Oh, there we go. So when we look at risk, we try to, like I said, break it down into 3 different areas. And I want to talk briefly about each of these. So really, first we look at strategic risks. And when I talk about strategic risks, those are really anything that impacts the value of your organization, the equity value of your company. So think about things like brand management and reputational risk. You've all heard about companies that have maybe manufactured a faulty product that had to be recalled, or maybe companies that decided on a certain advertising campaign based on social conditions at the time that didn't pan out, and it had an impact on their sales, had an impact on their client base. Your reputation and your brand is a key component to the value of your company, and what are you doing to protect against that? When we look at this, we also think about the loss of a key employee or the loss of a key customer. So if you have a large amount of revenue coming from one single customer and they decide they want to buy from somebody else, or they go out of business, how does that impact your company, and how are you hedging against that? Because that has a major impact on the value of your organization. The other thing we talk about is really when we look at business continuity. And that may sound odd to you. That can be an opportunity, but frankly, we've seen it be a risk as well. A lot of you in this room are focused on growing your organization, which you should be. But oftentimes what we see in our seat is people fail to plan for the end. They fail to plan for how they're going to get out of the business, how they're going to transfer the ownership of that business, how they're going to obtain the wealth that they've created in that business. And we've seen, unfortunately, a number of times, and you have too, companies that grow to the point where they don't plan for how they're going to move the business forward, and they have to sell to a competitor, they have to sell to private equity, and it's something they weren't necessarily planning on. So don't get me wrong, some companies are built to sell, and your goal may be to build it up and sell to private equity, and that's great. But the key here is have a plan on perpetuation and succession planning, and frankly, the folks at Rea, they can really assist you with this. Business risk, that's the next bucket that we look at when we talk about types of risk. And this is really anything that impacts the operations or the finances of your company. So think cash flow. This is very human resources centric, I would say. So how are you attracting and retaining the best people? Because you know that the quality and the education and the training of your people translates directly into the quality of the products that you're manufacturing and you're putting on the market. So how are you attracting them? How are you retaining them? And if you're not attracting or retaining them, that could have an impact on the cash flow of your organization. Employee embezzlement is another one, and that may sound odd to you, but we've seen this happen. It's a risk that can impact the finances of your company. So how are you separating responsibilities as it comes to the management of your payables? Is the person or the department that's responsible for issuing payables also handling the receivables? Is the person that is writing checks also reconciling the statements? If you answered yes to any of those, frankly, you have a risk. And a lot of people gloss over and say, you know, I'm not worried about this. John has worked for me for 30 years, or Sally's worked for me for 30 years, and there's no way they would ever steal from me. That's the one that's going to steal from you. And I don't mean they will, but frankly, when we've seen issues like this, it's always from the long-term trusted family person that you've known for years, you never think would do it, and you find out good grief, they've been skimming for 20 years, and that's why my financial statements don't quite add up. So you can protect against this, but that can have an impact on the operations and the finances of your company. The other thing I'd mention here is just disaster management planning. If your company sustained a disruption and you couldn't operate at full capacity for 6 months, for 12 months, 18 months, what are you going to do? What backup plans do you have in place? What contingency plans? Tommy talked a bit about it with supply chain management. What do you have in place that can help mitigate against those business risks that impact the cash flow of your organization? The final one we talk about is hazard risk. And this is really just anything that poses a threat to the physical assets of your organization, of your company. So think buildings and equipment. Is the product you're manufacturing, does it need a sprinkler system? Or maybe you bought a building that had a sprinkler system, but now what you're manufacturing doesn't quite meet, the sprinkler system doesn't meet the design for that. That's something you want to take into consideration. Are you doing any infrared scans on your electrical panels to look for hot spots that might be present and present a risk there? How are you storing chemicals? How are you storing explosives, propane tanks for your tow motors? All those things can present physical risks to your physical property. And then a big one over the last 4 or 5 years is, and this does relate to insurance, but how confident are you that the replacement value that you have on your insurance for your buildings and your equipment is adequate? I can tell you the cost to build a building today is a lot different than it was 5 years ago. Labor and materials has gone up at a rapid pace. Are you confident that those things are keeping pace and your insurance coverage is up to date for that too? So I would encourage you, talk with your risk management team if you have them to help identify this. Talk with your management team if you don't have a technical risk management team. Folks at Rea can help you on the financial side, or frankly, talk with your insurance advisor. That's really what he or she should be doing for you, is assisting and identifying these types of risks and helping you find ways to mitigate against them. When we talk about mitigation of risk, first of all, you have to identify what the risks are, and then the next step is to really position yourself to avoid or to protect against what risks are facing your company. As business owners, you're all focused on growth. You all are trying to innovate and create new products that are going to grow your business, but frankly, you also have to be thinking defensively. And your role is not only to grow, but to protect. Protect against physical threats, to protect against lawsuits, anything really that could derail the operations of your company. Unfortunately, we live in a litigious society. You all are aware of that. Personally, that's not a belief of mine. I mean, I would much rather resolve conflict through conversation and negotiation and compromise, but our secular society does not necessarily share my views on that. So you have to be prepared to defend yourself, and a good risk manager or risk management team will help you not only avoid risk, but also make you as defensible as possible to prevent against that. So when we look at risk mitigation strategies, what are some ways that we can do that? You can see the first here, and these may sound basic. I'm going to talk a little bit about each one, but really establish a culture of safety. And that starts from the top down, from your management and your leadership team. And you have to believe that protecting your people and protecting your customers trumps making a profit. If you protect your people, you protect your customers and produce quality products, the profits will follow. But you have to make sure that's part of what you're doing. Some of you may have safety directors. If you don't, consider putting someone in place, hiring someone, or putting a role in place that focuses strictly on safety training, safety management. You can outsource that as well, but that's an important piece. Quality control. Hopefully you all have established quality control procedures in place that are documented, that are retained, that you can draw back on if you ever need to in the event of a lawsuit or something that's coming against you. And then really, when we look at a culture of safety, what are you doing with your managers? How are you integrating this? Are they being rewarded for fewer incidents? Are they being rewarded for quality products that they're putting on the market or lack of incidents there? You've heard it said that what gets managed gets measured, and that's really true when it comes to safety. So build that into your culture. Policies and procedures. This one sounds fairly dry, and it may be, but it's important. So really from all aspects of your company, whether it's human resources or production, engineering, sales and marketing, you should have some standardized policies and procedures that you can fall back on, that you can train on so that your people are working in the same direction. and that's all documented. What are you doing with employee screening? Do you have policies for how you onboard employees? Are you doing background checks? Are you doing reference checks, pre-employment physicals, drug screening? These are all things that can be overlooked, but frankly are important when you're talking about bringing on people and what policies you have in place there. Employee handbooks, those are fairly basic. I would assume all of you have those. If you don't, you should work on putting one in place. There are a lot of resources out there that are available. Fleet safety programs. If you have vehicles, you need to have a fleet safety program that identifies what a qualified driver looks like. How often are you running motor vehicle reports? Do you have a family use policy? If employees are taking vehicles home at night, are their spouses, are their kids using the vehicles? Do you even know? Texting while driving. All of these things should be in a documented format that's administered and distributed to your employees, and they should be signing off that these are received. Now, it sounds mundane. This may sound tedious. It is to me. Frankly, I don't play in this space. It's a drain on my energy, and it might be in yours too. But I can tell you, as someone who's been deposed, it's important. And I don't know if anybody's ever been through a lawsuit or been through a deposition or had that joyful experience. It's brutal. And I can tell you that any good plaintiff attorney, if you have an accident with a vehicle that causes a fatality or an injury to someone on the road, if you have a product failure that causes injury, plaintiff attorney is going to drill you pretty hard on what are your policies, what are your procedures, what mitigation strategies do you have, how are your employees trained? And if you have documents that say, well, this is how we do it, this is our policy, this is where they signed off that they did receive it, and this was just an accident, it's not going to make the lawsuit go away, but it's going to help you in your settlement. If you just say, yeah, we value safety, and we think that's important, but you have nothing to back it up, you're at risk. So policies and procedures are important. Contractual risk. This is another one where we see people assuming liability that they really shouldn't, and there are ways you can transfer risk that cost you nothing. Now, I'll give the disclaimer, I'm not an attorney, but in our line of work, we do review a lot of contracts and we see a lot of legal documents. And I can tell you a lot of people will avoid contracts because, or avoid reviewing contracts for one of two reasons. First, it's because they don't want to take the time. They want to keep the process moving. They want to sign the client. They want to sign a new vendor. And so they just sign it and kind of glance over it and move on. Second reason is because they don't want to spend $500, $1,500, whatever it may be, to send it to your attorney and have them review. But I'd like to encourage you, if you take nothing else away from this, have your attorney review your contracts, because what's in there is critical, and frankly, you can shift responsibility and liability to others that rightfully should be their responsibility. So some areas we see this is in supplier and vendor contracts. You could be assuming the liability of something that you don't even manufacture, and there's ways to transfer that risk. If you are simply distributing a product, it comes into you, you don't modify, you don't alter it, you just get it in, sell it out. There are ways you can transfer that risk back to the manufacturer, because if you sell it, you're going to be named in a suit. And if you didn't have anything to do with the production, you can pass that on back to the manufacturer, and they would be responsible for defending you. So supplier and vendor agreements. Employment agreements. This is another big one for you to consider in all areas. But your employment agreements with key employees that might be in engineering or production or sales, they should have non-solicitations. So if your employees leave and go somewhere else, they can't contact your clients or your customers and take them with them. Non-piracy. So they can't leave and then take 5 other of your key employees and say, hey, it's better over here, come join me. Non-disclosure agreements, non-disparagement agreements, so they can't share any trade secrets with your competitors if they go there. So employment agreements are another place where you can really manage risk from a contractual standpoint. Lease agreements. This one's fairly basic. Whether you're the building owner or you're the tenant, there are ways in a lease you can transfer risk, and you can make sure you're responsible for what you should be responsible for, and the tenant or the building owner is responsible for what he or she should be responsible for. Fairly simple to do those. And then the other one I see is credit agreements. So you have salespeople. They want to grow. They're ambitious and aggressive, and they may want to extend credit to a new customer. How do you know that customer is creditworthy? And who has the authority to extend credit to those people? There are credit risk managers that you have access to, and we can help you with that if you need. that can help protect and defend against that. So contractual risk is another place where we can see you putting mitigating strategies in place. Finally, I would say insurance considerations. Insurance, like I mentioned earlier, is a pretty big component of any risk management plan. And anecdotally, I always tell our folks, if we hire someone new that's coming in to sell insurance, I say, good luck. Good luck selling this product for a couple reasons. First of all, how many of you really get excited when you think about buying insurance? You don't have to raise your hand because I know nobody's going to raise their hand. It's a product you can't see, you can't feel, you can't touch, so you don't really get excited about it. Next, it's a product most people don't understand. It's written by attorneys. It's confusing. And you have coverage, and then there are exclusions that take it away. But then there's little caveats where they give it back, but they cap it at a lower limit. It's confusing. It's a product that, frankly, you're forced to buy. And looking around the room and knowing most business owners, you don't like being told what to do. But the government, a bank, a contract, somebody's going to force you to buy it. And the biggest piece is you've got this product you don't really want to buy, and it's the only thing you have that you really don't want to use. If you have to use your insurance program, it's a bad day. You've had a lawsuit, you've had an accident, something has gone wrong, and you're probably going into the negotiation with the adjuster thinking, I'm going to be taken advantage of. That's typically the mentality people go into. So it's a tough product to understand, but frankly, it's critical. And I always say insurance is really the lubricant that allows the economy to function. Because without it, who's going to take a risk? How many of you are going to build a building? How many of you are going to drive your vehicle down the road? Who's going to innovate and put a new product out on the market? If you know, if this thing fails, it's on me. It's the assets of my company. So I'm going to talk about a few key insurance considerations you may want to consider that really pertain to manufacturing companies. And some of these you may know, some of them may be a part of your insurance program, but these to me, and frankly, I could go on for several hours, you don't want to hear it. So I just tried to identify 4 or 5 here that I think are critical that you should consider. Business interruption, or maybe you've heard it called business income coverage. Frankly, to me, this is one of the most important property type risk mitigation considerations and forms of coverage you can have as part of your program. It's easy to replace, I shouldn't say easy. You can replace buildings, you can replace equipment, inventory, but what's challenging to replace is your people and your customers, and really your cash flow. So when you talk about business interruption coverage, there are really 4 things that come into play. If you have claims to your building, and you all as manufacturers, you're dependent on your building to manufacture and to generate revenue. But if there's a claim and you can't operate at the normal level, it's going to cover 4 main things. It's going to cover your lost profit, not top line revenue, but lost profit during the period that you're out of operation. It's going to cover continuing expenses. So even though you're not generating revenue, you may still have to pay a mortgage. You may have to pay a line of credit, taxes, insurance. Those things go on. It's going to cover payroll. You may not want to cover the payroll for every employee, but you may have some key men and women that you don't want to leave. So even if you can't work, you want to make sure they're getting paid so they don't go somewhere else. And then the other one that we call kind of the slush fund is what is called extra expense. And those are expenses you would not have otherwise incurred, but for the claim or the incident that you had at your property. So if you have to lease a warehouse somewhere because yours is damaged and you have to pay a higher rent, or maybe you're not paying rent at all, but you have to pay extra for that, that's covered. If you have to bring in a generator and it costs $10,000 a day or a week just to power your production equipment, that's covered. If you have to outsource the fulfillment of your product to someone else, and you normally wouldn't have that expense, that would be covered. The other thing on this one that people oftentimes overlook is you can extend this to what we would call dependent properties. So if you have a key supplier and they supply you with maybe a unique metal or some resin or something that you can't readily find on the market, and they sustain a property claim where they are out of operation and they can't provide you with what you need, you can insure against that. On the flip side, if you have a key customer that may buy 30, 40% of your product, and it's a big customer of yours, and they have a property claim and they're not operating and they're not able to buy from you, you can insure against that. So these are all things you need to evaluate, and you can with business interruption. In a similar vein, off-premises power interruption. How many people remember what happened June 14th, 2022? Yeah, a number of you. A number of you may have been affected. That was the microburst derecho that came through Wayne and Holmes County and caused a lot of disruption just south of here and a bit west of here as well. But we had a number of claims in this area where the manufacturing company that was a client of ours was just fine. Nothing was wrong at their facility. But 2 miles down the road, all the power lines were down, the substation was out of operation. And so they were without power for 3, 4, I think some were without power for 8 days. And they could not operate. Had nothing to do with their business and the way they operated, but it was something out of their control off premises. Well, you can insure against that. If you lose business, if you lose income and revenue and profit from that, you can insure against it. So something to be aware of, especially as we talk about climate change and changing weather patterns that are hitting us now where they didn't used to. Product recall. This is another one. Whether you're in business-to-business sales or business-to-consumer sales, this is a component of your risk management and insurance program you may want to consider, especially if you're in the consumer goods space or you're manufacturing a finished product, or certainly if you're manufacturing any food, some type of food component or food product. What this does is it'll provide coverage for a defective product or something that's mislabeled, or if something has to be recalled, it can compensate and reimburse you for those expenses. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a regulatory agency that initiates it. You can initiate it. If you find out, hey, we had a bad batch of something go through, we've got to get all this back. So there's really two types of coverage on this. There's a limited one called product recall expense, and that's really just going to provide some coverage for, or some financing for notification. You've got to notify your customers that you've had an incident. It may cover some transportation expenses. It may cover some temporary warehousing to get your product back so you can take care of it. The larger, more robust, full-blown product recall plan will cover not only the expenses, but it'll also cover the cost of corrections. It'll cover some loss of business income for you. You can even build in what they would call crisis management. So if you make the news because of your recall, which is never a good thing, you can have crisis management firms come in and help you really mitigate that and protect your brand and your reputation. Liability limit evaluation. Most of you are probably familiar with the liability you have on primary policies with auto liability and with product liability, and those are typically $1 million limits. But you can buy more, and how much more should you have? That's a consideration for you and your company. I've heard the mantra many times, Matt, why do I need to buy umbrella coverage, which really is just the extension, the higher limits you buy. Why do I need to buy that? Aren't the attorneys just going to sue me for my insurance limits? No, the answer is no. If your insurance limits are exhausted, the assets of your company are next in line. That's what's at stake. And so there are a number of ways that people try to determine how much liability coverage they need. Unfortunately, there's no good rule of thumb. Some people will look at their balance sheet and say, I have this much in assets. That's where I'm going to set my limit. Others will say, I have a contract requiring this much. That's how much I'm going to buy. Some people will just say, hey, this is what I can afford. And certainly that's a component. Cost certainly comes into play. But what I like to do when I'm talking with people about how much liability coverage they need is to flip it around and ask, how much would it take to replace your standard of living? There are a number of young people in this room. If you're more seasoned in your career, think back to when you were in your 30s or 40s and you had a lot of high income earning years ahead of you, and you're building an asset with your company, and you've got financial goals for your family and maybe educational goals for your kids. If something happened to you at that period in time and you had to replace your standard of living because you couldn't work for the rest of your life, would $1 million be enough? Probably not for anybody in this room, if I had to guess. Cost does come into play. It's a consideration, but those are the types of things you need to be thinking about as you evaluate risk and you evaluate how much insurance protection to buy. And I can tell you from experience, we've seen 8-figure claims paid out because of some product failures, because of accidents on the road. It is a risk. Final thing I'll talk about, and Tommy touched on it, cyber liability. And this is really an emerging risk. 10 years ago, very few people purchased cyber liability coverage. Today, it's becoming fairly integrated, and it's important for manufacturers because there are really two components. There are first-party components to cyber liability, and there are third-party. So on the first-party side, it will protect you if your network, maybe your CNC software becomes encrypted and and somebody hacks in and they basically suspend your operations, it can provide coverage for you to restore those. If somebody holds your system for ransom or tries to extort you, it provides coverage for that and negotiation for that. That's the first party side. On the third party side, if you have any personally identifiable information, so social security numbers of your employees, you probably don't have social security numbers for clients or customers, but you may have bank routing information. If you fail to secure that and there's a breach and it's traced back to your system, your failure to secure it, you're liable for fraudulent tax returns, for fraudulent credit applications, whatever it is that the hackers tried to get, you're on the hook for that. So you can defend against that with a lot of internal protections with your IT team, but a cyber liability policy, frankly, is something you all should be considering if you haven't already. So those are some of the insurance considerations. I appreciate you guys listening. At this time, I'm gonna turn it back over to Tommy.
All right, very good. Thanks, Matt. I'm going to go ahead and jump back. Oh, you did it. Very good. So going to transition a little bit to the risk management process. This is a process that we tend to go through. It's a healthy flow of being able to structure what these considerations look like. But I think it's interesting as we, again, partner with Rea in some of these topics and what we're talking about, I think you can feel and see that risk management is intertwined in everything that they do and we do, and it's a topic that of course, becomes to the forefront whenever there's a disruption of cash flow. So I'd like to go through each of these steps. I'm going to provide just some brief statements on each one, and then we're going to transition to a final slide. So we are rounding home base because I know that we're the only thing standing between you and lunchtime. The first one is identification. So Matt had referenced this before, but this is essentially being intentional about reviewing the business's risk profile and the vulnerabilities that exist that could compromise the goals of the company. So identifying what are those things that could create disruptions. The second thing is analysis. That's evaluating the financial impact of those exposures that exist in the business. For example, how might a product recall or how might a loss of a key employee or a loss of a key supplier or even change in market conditions disrupt the pursuit of those goals? So analyzing that to understand that financial impact. The third is control. And as part of that, that is essentially designing or creating a risk management plan that outlines an action plan to reduce or retain the risk, or on the other hand, transfer that risk to an insurance company. So how is that going to be controlled? That's done through plan development. Fourth is financing. So what method of payment would you use if you experienced a loss? Where would those funds come from? And evaluating the most cost-effective way to do that as part of the objectives of the business. I'll share more on alternative ways to finance risk here in just a moment. Then finally, administration, risk administration. I want to swap out administration, put execution. Because again, the idea of developing a plan is really not helpful unless it's executed. So determine how you intend to monitor the risk of your company by developing key performance indicators that evaluate its impact on business goals, kind of going back to the control phase of this risk management process, and identifying what that impact is, and then building prioritization of what are the areas that we need to address first, second, and so on to make sure that that's cared for appropriately. Best practices. Create a culture of risk awareness and mitigation. So it permeates throughout the entire organization from leadership down. Being aware of what those risks are, going back to phase one of identification, really helps employees to understand not only the growth, but the protection of that growth going forward. The second is incentivize the employees to practice that safety and quality in that manufacturing process. And then finally, I'll end where I began. Execute the plan. Build out that risk management process and have a method to execute it going forward. Okay, last slide here. So going to transition to some alternative risk strategies. First want to ask, how many of you are familiar with the term captive insurance? Okay, so this is a topic that's been around for a long time. It's been around for almost 80 years now. It actually started in Cleveland. The idea is that where there was difficulty in procuring insurance coverage, the idea was, what if we just create our own insurance company? So they called that captive insurance. So here's the definition of it. It's essentially a risk-bearing entity that is created to insure the risks of its parent company. As part of that, it allows businesses to directly manage risk, take financial control of their own insurance spend, and become the beneficiaries of their own good loss history. There's 5 compelling reasons to consider a captive. These are the ones that we hear the most. Number 1, it's a philosophical shift from being a buyer of insurance to a risk management entity. The second is independence and control of managing claims and losses. When they become your own and not just directly transferring it to an insurance company, it sits a little deeper. So independence and control in managing that process. The third is the ability to turn a business expense into a profit center for the owners of the captive. The fourth is use profits to subsidize the cost of investing in risk mitigation resources, people, and assets. And then finally creates a stewardship mindset and a culture within the organization to improve quality control, safety, and health. So again, philosophical shift of how risk is managed. Here's an interesting statistic for you. In 2018, 23% of all insurance premium dollars in the US were paid into captives, 23%, which includes Fortune 500 companies, all lines of coverage, including health insurance. Here's a staggering figure. In 2024, it's estimated that 58% of all insurance premiums in the US will be paid into captives, according to Marsh McLellan. More than doubled over that period of time because of the nature or the status of where the insurance market is today. More and more companies are taking on the initiative to develop their own risk-bearing entities. So here are some of the characteristics of a captive owner. We often hear, okay, well, that's interesting, but who qualifies for that? Who might this most benefit? So I'll go through a short list here. Number 1, financially healthy companies, particularly with cash flow and reserves. So those that manage that well, have the reserves and the ability to be able to manage their own claims and the losses that take place. Entrepreneurial leaders that desire to retain control. Those who are frustrated by rising insurance costs when the losses don't justify the increases. Leaders committed to loss control and risk management, all of the things that we've talked about up to this point. Those who are comfortable with retaining more risk. Leaders who are committed to a long-term solution as an owner of an additional entity that supports the primary operating entity. And then finally, those that have in excess of $250,000 in insurance spend. And the reason why that's important is because captive insurance, just like any other insurance, is state regulated. There are collateral requirements, and the financial health of the company does matter, and there's a correlation to size and scope. So, as I round the corner here, the final thing that I'll reference, I'd like to invite you to another educational opportunity that we're going to present. It's on Thursday, November 7th. It's going to be here in Worcester as well. We're going to be joined by the captive regulator for the state of Ohio. His name is Tracy Snow, to talk about what do those qualification elements look like, and how has that platform been successful for others. We're also going to have Ryan Ralston. He's president of Elevate Risk Solutions. They're a captive management company out of Oklahoma. He'll be in town to talk about how do you actually execute creating and building a captive insurance company, and a host of other experts in that area, including those even from this geographic area that have elected to move forward with a captive, to share what their experience was like and why it's been beneficial for them. These are the 3 things that I think you'll glean from that. The first is identify if the captive's a viable solution. The third is learn different types of captives that are available. And then finally, discover if a captive could potentially be right for your company. Alternative risk solution, different way of viewing risk management, taking more control over that process. So that's all I have for now.
Good afternoon. My name is Kaitlyn Robison. I am the Director of Tax at Rea & Associates. Very excited to be here with you all this afternoon. So speaking right after lunch, it's my job to make sure that no one falls asleep. And historically, taxes are not widely considered the most riveting topic. But my goal is that the information I'm sharing with you today is both informative and interesting. So you'll see an agenda here. I'll spend the majority of my time with you all providing some insight into each presidential candidate's tax proposals. And that's going to lead us to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and what's going to be coming to a close if these provisions are not extended with new legislation. I'll also provide you with some potential sunset strategies to consider. And finally, we will review the most prevalent tax opportunities for manufacturers. So there have not been any significant changes or updates since last year's presentation, so that information will mostly just be a review. All right, so taxes and the election. Why do candidates spend so much time on their campaign trail discussing their tax platforms? Obvious answer is that other than our financial health being rated as the most important type of health, obviously beyond our physical health, tax policies have been used for centuries as a vehicle to actually impact human behavior. So look through 3 examples here. And these are examples of the power of tax policies incentivizing businesses and consumers. First image up here is of a White Claw. So I don't know if any of you all have noticed that spiked seltzers have really taken over the alcohol aisle. And that's in part related to tax policy, actually. So these were originally considered vodka sodas, but producers found a way to make the beverages by fermenting or distilling sugar. And since it is brewed like a beer, it gets taxed like a beer. And this allows the beverage to avoid the hefty distilled spirits excise tax. So that's just one example. Another would be the Hershey bar versus the Twix. So when creating the Twix bar, Mars intentionally designed the recipe to have the right amount of flour in it. And flour happens to be an ingredient that determines whether an item is a food product versus a candy. So because it has the correct amount of flour, this makes the Twix bar exempt from sales tax in 24 states that don't tax your groceries. Last one is an international example. So although we might recognize Copenhagen as one of the cycling capitals of the world, that is not strictly a cultural thing. Denmark actually levies a 150% excise tax on new vehicle purchases. So this would make a vehicle that retails for $30,000 in the US, $75,000 in Denmark. So this is just a few examples of how tax policies can be structured to actually influence people to behave in certain manners. As we look at these presidential tax platforms, we can start to determine the economic behaviors that are encouraged with the proposed policies. So let's look at a quick history of our presidents and their relation to taxes. So these presidents listed on this slide here are known as the 5 presidents with the highest tax increases. So if we look at Abraham Lincoln, looks like a small number, but he created the income tax, so 5 is greater than 0. And this was created to help fund the Civil War. And you'll see war is a common theme in these tax hikes. Next picture up there is Woodrow Wilson. So he was elected in 13, but in 17 raised the top tax rate to 67%. And that was in part to pay for World War I. And then we look at Truman. Top tax rate there was 94%. And that was in part to fund World War II. So just a couple examples there. This slide here is showing the 5 presidents that cut taxes to the greatest degree. And so we look at Reagan, 50% still seems like a hefty top rate, but not when you consider that it was lowered from 70 down to 50. And then in 86, the top rates he brought down to 28%. Then Clinton and Bush both made this list with their tax code revisions. So Clinton slashed the capital gains tax and introduced some of the things that we still use today, so the child tax credit and also the Roth IRA. And then the Bush tax cuts provided significant breaks for corporations, and the top 1% received tax cuts of more than $50,000 a year. So that's just a quick history to bring us to where we are today. So now we will look at the 2024 presidential tax plans. What can we expect to see over the next 4 years based on the tax proposals of each candidate? So I've broken down the tax plans into 5 categories. The first would be business and competitiveness. You'll also see there's a column for the Biden-Harris administration. Kamala Harris may continue some of the same policies that were put forth in the fiscal year 25 budget by the administration, or she may propose additional tax policy changes. If we look up here, I'm not sure how well you can see this, so I will try my best to summarize. Donald Trump, he would like to lower the corporate income tax rate from 21% down to 20%, and has also proposed lowering the corporate income tax rate to 15% for companies that make their products in the United States. Kamala Harris would like to increase the corporate income tax rate to 28%. She's talked about clawback deductions for depreciation and interest for certain rental construction investments. Also would like to expand housing tax credits, including the low-income housing tax credit, which is a credit for new home buyers and also a credit for the construction of started homes. And then also she has discussed increasing the $5,000 deduction for startup costs to $50,000. The Biden-Harris administration also has discussed increasing the corporate income tax rate to 28%, so that's one of those items that has carried over. There's also talks of increasing the global intangible low tax income tax rate to 10.5% to 21%, and also repealing the reduced tax rate on foreign-derived intangible income. They also considered expanding the net investment income tax to also apply to non-passive business income, and also raising taxes on the fossil fuel industry. So we'll see, especially from Kamala Harris, she focuses on tax breaks relating to housing. So that's something that has been a common theme across the board. And so when I'm looking at these areas where there's a common theme, it kind of takes me back to the psychology of why the different tax proposals are introduced. Next category here would be families and workers. So Donald Trump would like to make the expiring individual income tax cuts from the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent. We'll talk a little bit about this later in the presentation, what's all involved there. Consider replacing personal income taxes with increased tariffs. Consider expanding the child tax credit to a $5,000 universal credit. Reinstating an unlimited itemized deduction for state and local taxes, or discontinue the cap as part of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act extension. So we'll see talks of extending everything within the Tax Cut and Jobs Act from the Republican Party, except for that cap on state and local taxes. And so they'd like to discontinue that piece. Also talks of exempting Social Security benefits from taxation, exempting tip income from taxation, and also exempting overtime pay from taxation. So I've listened to a lot of tax podcasts recently, and some of these proposals, especially exempting tip income and overtime from taxation, is something that would be administratively almost impossible. So I'm not sure how much movement either party would be able to get on this item here, because we also see that Kamala is in agreement on exempting tip income from taxation. Another item here coming from the DNC is to expand the child tax credit to $6,000 for children under 1, $3,600 for children 2 through 5, and then $3,000 for older children. They'd like to expand the earned income tax credit for filers who do not claim children. So currently, the earned income tax credit is most significant for those that have children. Expanding premium tax credits, so these are relating to the credits available to help cover the premiums for health insurance. Expanding housing tax credits, we discussed this on the previous slide, and then also increasing Medicare tax to reach 5% on income over $400,000. Some of these things you'll see also within the Biden-Harris administration, so the talks of making the child tax credit fully refundable on a permanent basis, the same increase to the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit, and also increasing the net investment income tax as well as the Medicare tax to that 5%. And finally, increasing top individual income tax rates to 39.6% of income above $400,000 for single filers and $450,000 for joint filers. Next category is savings and investments. So Donald Trump has discussed taxing large private university endowments. Kamala Harris would like to increase the top tax rate on long-term capital gains to 28% for taxable income above $1 million. And then also increasing the net investment income tax as well. Biden-Harris administration has discussed taxing long-term capital gains and qualified dividends at ordinary income tax rates for taxable income over $1 million and taxing unrealized capital gains at death above a $5 million exemption. Another item on here is taxing carried interest as ordinary income, imposing a minimum effective tax rate of 20% on large amounts of income. So they discussed unrealized capital gains, taxing those, and also increasing that investment income tax and Medicare tax to reach 5% of income above $400,000. Again, some of these items here are just administratively a nightmare. So even though they're being introduced on the campaign trail, the odds of them actually coming to fruition are quite slim. Next category would be tariffs and industrial policy. So Trump has discussed imposing a universal baseline tariff on all US imports of 10% to 20%, imposing a 60% tariff on all US imports from China. Kamala Harris has not determined any specific policies within this category, but may continue with the Biden-Harris administration or eventually propose additional policy. So a few of the items discussed by the Biden-Harris administration are maintaining the current Section 301 tariffs on roughly $360 billion worth of goods from China, while also raising tariffs on an additional $18 billion worth of steel, aluminum, and green energy and medical goods. And then also expanding the current Section 232 tariffs on steel and aluminum to apply to certain imports from Mexico. All right, so the last category here is how each of the presidential candidates feel about the Tax Cut and Jobs Act and what they're proposing going forward. Trump would like to make the expiring individual income tax cuts from the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent. And we'll look at what those are on the next slide. And also make the expiring estate tax cuts from the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent. And then, like we discussed, reinstating the unlimited itemized deductions for state and local taxes. So removing that cap that came with the TCJA. Kamala Harris has not announced what her official stance is on the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, but the Biden-Harris administration proposed extending the expiring individual income tax changes, but only for taxpayers making under $400,000. All right, so the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, it's set to sunset on December 31st, 2025. So we'll look at what is going to expire with that act and also some potential sunset strategies. Individual income tax, so we would have a reversion to the higher tax rates that were in place before the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. Reduction of the standard deduction by approximately 50%. There would be the return of the personal exemption. The AMT exemption and phase out would revert to pre-Tax Cut and Jobs Act amounts. And so just to give you a good idea of who that would affect, pre-Tax Cut and Jobs Act, AMT applied to 59% of those who had adjusted gross income between $200,000 and $500,000, and 51% of those with AGI between $500,000 and $1 million. With the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, only 1% of individuals that made between $200,000 and $500,000 had to worry about AMT, and only 3% of those between the $500,000 and $1 million threshold. So a significant number of individuals will be affected by AMT if the Tax Cut and Jobs Act does expire without any sort of new legislation. Child tax credit would go from $2,000 back down to $1,000. And then if we look at itemized deductions, so that SALT cap that was introduced with the Tax Cut and Jobs Act would go away. The changes to mortgage interest deduction, home equity loan interest was disallowed with the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. And then there was a threshold of $750,000 of debt versus the $1 million of debt to which the mortgage interest deduction applied pre-Tax Cut and Jobs Act. Miscellaneous itemized deductions. So the Tax Cut and Jobs Act eliminated most of these itemized deductions that exceeded 2% of the adjusted gross income. So that would be like your investment or advisory fees, legal fees, unreimbursed employee expenses. So those 2% deductions would return at the expiration of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. If you look at business tax, so QBI, that qualified business income deduction, which allows 20% on income from pass-through entities or from sole proprietorships. So that will no longer be available. The net operating loss carrybacks and the 100% carry forward rules will come back into play. There's a note here that corporate tax rate provision does not expire at the end of 2025. So the changes to that corporate income tax rate, those were made permanent, so that will not sunset with the expiration of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. We're looking at estate tax. Currently, individuals can inherit an estate up to $13.61 million without triggering the estate tax. If the Tax Cut and Jobs Act expires at the end of 2025, the exemption amount would revert to roughly $7 million beginning in 2026. So that number was adjusted for inflation. So what are some potential sunset strategies if the Tax Cut and Jobs Act does expire without any sort of new legislation being introduced to extend some of these provisions? One of the things we can look at is accelerating ordinary income. So if your top income tax rate is projected to be higher than it is today, you may want to accelerate your income into 2024 or 2025. Another item here is Roth IRA conversions. So you may want to take advantage of your tax rates now and be able to withdraw in the future tax-free. However, if you have charitable goals and you want to pass your IRA assets to charity, you would want to maintain that traditional IRA to take advantage of the qualified charitable deduction. Another strategy would be traditional IRA withdrawals. So if you're 59 and a half or older, you may want to consider accelerating your withdrawals beyond any sort of required minimum distribution to take advantage of the lower tax rates today. Entity type changes. So this is another consideration. We know that QBI deduction was introduced in part to balance out the reduced corporate income tax rates. So if no changes are made and that QBI deduction goes away, but the 21% corporate tax rate stays, you may want to consider changing the structure of your business entity. Another item to look at is exercising any sort of incentive stock options. That's something that you have. Generally, when you exercise an incentive stock option, you won't pay tax on the stock received until it is sold. However, with AMT returning, for AMT purposes, it is considered income to the taxpayer in the year of exercise. Another item here is to gift assets now. So you'll need to carefully consider with your advisor and compare the costs and benefits of either setting up trusts or outright gifts, because your assets may become ineligible for a step-up in basis if you gift your assets now. But we're going to talk about this a little bit more today. Any questions on any of the things that I've covered so far? It's really just a basic overview of what each presidential candidate is proposing, and also what is to come with the Tax Cut and Jobs Act sunsetting. All right, so finally we will look at a quick review of tax updates for manufacturers. Maybe. There we go. First category here is to look at fixed assets. So bonus depreciation, currently in this phase out. For 2024, take 60%, 2025, 40%, 2026, 20%, and then it will completely go away in 2027. So we want to look at the Section 179 deduction. For 2024, that deduction limit is $1,220,000, and the phase-out threshold for purchases begins at $3,050,000. One thing to consider here is to have a cost segregation. So this is going to allow you to accelerate depreciation deductions by reclassing certain assets to shorter recovery periods. You can also perform a look back on assets that are placed into service or were placed into service in a previous year. Another item that I'm sure you all have heard so much about recently is the R&D credit, and also Section 174. So R&D credits for development or improvement to products, processes, or software. To qualify for this credit, you have to pass the 4-part test. So does it lead to creation or improvement of a product, process, or software? Is it technological in nature? Was there uncertainty about the method, approach, or outcome? And was the process experimental in nature? Section 174, so there was a fix that came through on a bill, but that bill was never passed by the Senate, and so this is still required capitalization and amortization of R&D expenditures versus outrightly expensing these items. R&D tax credit can offset some of these additional expenses. There is a funded research exclusion, so if a company is conducting that research for you, you may have to amortize those costs but not be able to take advantage of the R&D credit. And so there can be some issues here where that credit is unable to offset some of these additional expenses that have to be amortized versus expensed in the year that they're incurred. Next up, we have some credits, exemptions, and incentives. So the work opportunity tax credit, This is a federal tax credit for hiring from certain eligible groups. This has been authorized through December 31st of 2025. Some examples of those eligible groups would be disabled veterans, unemployed veterans, SNAP recipients, ex-felons, and there are many others. Sales tax exemption, so Ohio has a manufacturing exemption. And then also these export incentives, so the IC disc or the FDII deduction. And then finally, the credits that came with the Inflation Reduction Act. And so there's the Advanced Energy Project Credit. This will be for projects that re-equip, expand, or establish an industrial or manufacturing facility to produce or recycle specified advanced energy property, to install technology in an industrial or manufacturing facility to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 20%, re-equip, expand, or establish an industrial facility to process, refine, or recycle critical materials. And so that's going to equal 30% of the qualified investment costs for the projects that meet prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements, or 6% for projects that don't meet those requirements. And so we are on phase 2 of the funding that's available for this credit. You can apply through the Department of Energy portal until October 18th for the second phase. And then the second item here is the Advanced Manufacturing Production Credit. And so this is going to provide a production tax credit for domestic manufacturing of solar and wind energy, inverters, battery components, and critical materials. And these items must be produced in the United States and sold after 2022. And that credit there, do not need to apply for through the Department of Energy. It's just taken on your tax return. Any questions? All right, thank you guys for listening to me today after lunch, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Is there a lapel mic or I turned it off. But yes, it'll turn. Sounds good. Yes. And here's the clicker here for you.
Yeah, we got it. You need this? Oh, you want that? Check 1, 2. I'm good.
Check.
Sounds good.
Yep, great. Oh, you can bypass the pictures, man.
The mug shots.
Yeah, exactly. Well, again, thanks for coming and joining us today. Jeff Rapp, I'm responsible for the Rea Information Services at Rea Associates, which is our external-facing technology consulting division. We provide managed security and IT services to Rea Associates clients, as well as some strategic cybersecurity services like risk assessments, compliance assessments, those types of jobs to our clients as well. A little bit of background about me. I've been doing IT consulting services for small and medium businesses, a lot of manufacturing. Right now, about 30% of our clients are manufacturing clients. I've worked for manufacturing clients for the last 30 years in IT in various different roles, as well as spent some time in industry managing a large distribution center as well with 84 hourly employees. And so got to spend a lot of time in business and really learning about business from the business side or technology from the business side as opposed to just as a consultant as well. Travis?
And Travis Strong, I work alongside Jeff in Rea Information Services. A big focus of mine is on our service delivery as well as cybersecurity. I've worked in industry for over 15 years at a place over in Orville called Smuckers. So I was there for a number of years and then joined Rea a little over 2 years ago. To what Jeff mentioned, do a lot of risk assessment work, general cybersecurity work, and at the end of the day, we actually support all of our clients just on the service side. You call us up, you got an IT issue, we're the ones that provide that support for you. So that's us, and we've got 4 hours of presentation material. No, we'll get right into it here. From an agenda, I can go through this, Jeff. Just agenda standpoint, want to talk about just the importance of IT in manufacturing. We get questions, a variety of different questions, all across the spectrum as it relates to IT. One side of the spectrum is, we don't have a very large internet presence, or we don't have a lot of technology in place. What should we be thinking about if we take that next step? To the other side of the spectrum is technology runs our company, right? We've got potential risk and things like that we need to think through, or we got trouble with the technology and how it functions. So we're going to talk a little bit about just the importance of it in your space. And then cybersecurity specific to manufacturing. We've already heard a few folks hit on this topic a little bit, but we'll spend a couple minutes talking a little bit more about just the cybersecurity threats that are out there, as well as just some practical cybersecurity measures that basically a checklist of things that you guys can walk out of here with to make sure that you have in place at your organizations. Okay?
It's hard to read from up back here. I'll turn around this way. So we're going to talk a little bit about our IT's role in efficiency and really just in the organization. And before I jump into that, I'd like to know how many here have a spot on their leadership team or meet regularly with their internal IT team or IT partner to talk about business goals and objectives. Anybody have that? Good, a few. That's really where you're going to get the value from your IT team. And when we talk about IT team, that could be your internal IT folks if you have that department set up, or an external partner that you work with, right? We all kind of know IT support and IT in general is there to support the day-to-day operations of the business, keeping things running, provide a computer to an end user to use the applications that are important to the business. But the true value that you're going to get out of your IT spend and relationship is if you can get those partners involved in those discussions about where the business is going, the headaches that you're seeing and trying to reach those goals, so that they can help apply IT to those things and make sure that IT is supporting those functions that are going to make you successful or give you a competitive edge against the people that you might be competing with. So some of the things that in a manufacturing environment that are important for IT to be involved in from an efficiency standpoint is just supporting the operations of the business. That means a lot of different things. That might mean real-time monitoring, not of the technology per se, but real-time monitoring of production equipment, real-time monitoring and gathering data on the production lines, quality information, the ability to see what's going on in the production environment, and make sure that management can see how things are performing out on the floor. Another one is ERP systems, right? Making sure that we're setting up centralized ERP systems that might include, production planning, HR systems, payroll, all those things, making sure that those things are integrated and working well together, and then helping you manage your supply chain as well. From a technology standpoint, that can mean a couple of things, but as Tommy and Matt talked about earlier, the supply chain risk that's out there, that's heavy on the technology side. You should be looking at your supply chain vendors and making sure they're doing things from a cybersecurity standpoint that are going to protect them so that you can rely on them to be a good supplier for you as well. So your IT team should be focusing on helping you make sure that that supply chain is secure and supporting the business. Automate processes. This is a big one. Andrew and his group are doing a lot of this with our clients right now. One of the big values you're going to get is if you get IT to look at processes internally that might be causing you additional labor or slowing things down in production, and seeing how you can use technology to improve those processes. We've had a lot of success in just looking at some basic functionality within a department, like in an accounting department, and reducing the amount of time it takes to perform routine tasks through the use of automation to free those people up to do more valuable work in the environment. And improve productivity, right? So looking at those things in the environment that I kind of just mentioned that are slowing things down or you're spending a lot of labor on, right? And seeing where you can reduce that labor or take that labor and apply it to more important things to the organization. Technology can really help through the use of tools, like even AI, ChatGPT, or Microsoft Copilot. If you're using SharePoint, there's process automation tools like Power Apps and Power Automate that can be used to take a process that's routine and manual, turn it into an automated process, and really reduce the labor costs associated with that process. I do want to go back and just talk about data collection and analysis because I think that's important with what Andrew was talking about before. And I'm sorry, I don't know your name. You brought the operations side, right? Collecting that data from the operations side and being able to look at trends and what's taking place within the environment is an area that technology can really help you uncover inefficiencies and take that information and create a process or put in a solution that's going to help you improve those efficiencies in the production process. So if you're not using technology on the production floor right now, or it's limited to maybe just CNC equipment and maybe a little bit of job tracking, there is a lot of opportunity, even for a small organization, to put a little bit of spend into IT to collect more data and help you understand more what's going on the production floor, get more efficient, and improve quality as well. Any questions at this point? Okay. Some common technology challenges that we see in manufacturing. Thanks, Travis, for throwing that up. A lot of outdated technology. We do find, and especially some of the smaller manufacturing companies that we work with, and even some of the larger ones really, they might have a specialized piece of equipment that requires a Windows XP or Windows 7 workstation to run that piece of equipment. And there's a large security risk with that because you can't secure it anymore. And so that outdated technology that's on the production floor can really cause issues with cybersecurity. We also see outdated technology causing issues just with downtime. As technology gets older, it tends to fail a bit more often. And then it can also be harder to replace those systems if they're not updated because you don't know what you need to do to control that piece of equipment with a newer technology like a Windows 10 or 11 system or something like that. Incompatibilities and maintenance costs and performance issues. So the older your technology gets, the more issues you're going to have with performance, the more issues you're going to have with maintenance and keeping it up and running and higher costs there. And then also just incompatibility with newer applications and technology that may come out. So if you've got old equipment in the environment, it's really worth the effort to try and get it updated as much as you can to avoid those things. Integration problems. So I give a quick example here. I worked with a client a while ago in Nashville, Tennessee. It was a large food manufacturer, and they put in a new warehouse management system that was supposed to integrate with their ERP solution, right? And one of the problems with integrations is if they're not done well, you can actually create more manual processes that you have to try and work around to make the integration function or the two systems function together. In this situation, I walked in at the end of a production run into the inventory control department, and I walked into a stack of papers that they had on the floor. And I say stacks, they were like stacks like this that they had printed out. And they were manually going through all the transactions that were done in the warehouse management system and making sure that they were showing in the ERP system, the inventory module in the ERP solution, to make sure that things matched up. And they had actually hired 2 additional inventory control people to manage this process, all because the integration within those 2 systems wasn't functioning. So with technology and manufacturing, because there are so many different systems you might be trying to integrate with, right? warehouse management system, transportation management system, ERP, quality control information. If it's not done well, you can run into a situation where you're creating additional positions and manual processes to try and make those systems work together. So that's a common challenge that we see in manufacturing environments when they're using technology as well. That also has a tendency to create data silos in the environment. So when you talk about reporting, and Andrew was this morning, and having access to information, if your integration isn't working well and it's not bringing information together in a centralized location, you now start to have these data silos where this information lives, and you don't have access to those easily to get the information you need to have to manage the environment well. So all those things in integrations, if you're putting in new systems, you have to be aware of and manage well, or you can end up with some of these issues. Downtime, and not just downtime when somebody stands up and talk about technology and they start talking downtime, you might be thinking about, well, computers are down or the internet connection can be down. Manufacturing environments, an outage in technology can mean production downtime as well, right? So if you have key systems in place and one of those suffers an outage and you don't have a plan to quickly replace that system and make sure that you can get back up and running without impacting production, that one piece of technology may stop the whole production run, right? So understanding where downtime can impact production. If you have technology in place in those situations, making sure that you can recover from that situation quickly and get production up and running, and that you have that process documented so that when it happens, you know how to recover from that is really important. Lost revenue, as soon as production stops, right, revenue stops coming in the door, right? So keeping those systems up and running is really important. The flip side here is that we can also use technology to increase uptime in production. If you're monitoring your production equipment, if you have a way to track the maintenance on your production equipment using technology to provide reports and alerts when things need to be maintained and repaired, proactively repaired, technology can help support an increase in uptime as well. So don't think of downtime just as how do I fix something when something goes down. Think about how technology can also help you make sure that your uptime is where you want it to be on the production facility or on the production floor. And then lastly, employee productivity, right? In office environments, computers are down, people aren't productive. A lot of times on the production floor, if you're using technology, it goes down, people aren't productive, and you got to think about those costs as well and how you can avoid those costs. So those are some of the big things that we see in a manufacturing environment related to technology and some of the challenges that we see in and out of the facility. And Travis is going to talk cybersecurity because this is the other area that we run into a lot in manufacturing that's getting more important today for manufacturers as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, excuse me, hesitate. I mean, these topics are so commingled now, right, with IT and cybersecurity. But I guess as it pertains to this group, I mean, folks often ask us the question, well, are we a target? Are we, potentially prone to some of these cyber issues that are going on out there? The answer is yes. And in very simplistic terms, I like to think about maybe just paint a picture for you. Actually, I think it was Tommy gave you that number that this is almost a $10 trillion business right now, the cyber criminal space. It is a business. I mean, it's truly an industry that is out there, and they're making a lot of money off of what they're doing, all these attacks that they're doing. But if I could maybe just boil it down, there's kind of two types of actors that are out there. The reason I mention this to you because folks often ask me that question, am I a target? And really, for a lot of the companies in this room, I mean, the answer is yes. And the reason I say that is back to these two types of cyber criminals. One is, it's like your nation state actor. They're the folks that are going after the government entities. They're there for, some sort of political reason or something like that. The other type of threat actor, what we call a threat actor, a cyber criminal, is they're out there just to win the lottery, and the easiest, most efficient way they can do it They've got revenue goals that they want to make as well, so they're trying to find the low-hanging fruit. Those companies that, you know, may be small or medium-sized businesses that may not have all the investment in IT and cybersecurity that they should have in place. So manufacturing is actually a really large target for these threat actors that are out there. And then the other thing that I wanted to, and I don't have this in a slide, but the other thing I wanted to call out, I mean, we talk about cyber criminals all the time, right? Like when we think of cyber criminals, maybe we think of Russia or China or something like that. We all want to trust our own people too, but bad things happen internally as well, whether it's on purpose or on accident, right? So that's the other thing we have to be thinking about. A lot of the things that we talk about from an IT and a control and a security standpoint, they're really to kind of cover you both from the outside world and also what goes on internally. So it's checks and balances that you should have in place just to make sure you've got things in order. But some of the things on this slide, so just I wanted to talk a little bit about why manufacturers, why this industry is a target. And one of those reasons is because a lot of you have valuable intellectual property. Right? There's actually some, there's information that you have, there are concepts that you have, there are copyrights, trademark, whatever you want to call them. You've got some form of intellectual property that's your, we like to use the terminology, your crown jewels, right? What are your crown jewels that you absolutely want to protect? And for a lot of you, it's your intellectual property. It's that widget that you make, it's that process that you have in place, it's your recipe, it's your ingredient, whatever it is. Those are valuable, right? So that's a target for the threat actors to go after. And the next area is just how your role in the supply chain. We've talked about supply chain a few times over the course of the day too. And it's not just you, it's also your third parties, it's your customers. So what happens when something bad happens in the supply chain? Whether it's a raw material provider that maybe they get hacked and it impacts you. Whether it's, and then on the other end, if it's a customer and they get hacked, right, or they get compromised or something like that, and they can't actually accept shipments. So the supply chain is really, really important because it's disruptive when these things happen, whether it's to you or to the third parties that you work with. We talked, Jeff just hit on legacy or outdated technology. That's a low-hanging fruit for bad actors especially. Usually these systems, they don't have patches anymore. They don't have updates that are being provided by the vendor who sold them to you. So they can't really be supported anymore. If something bad happens, you call the vendor up, they're gonna be like, sorry, you have to buy something new, right? It is what it is. But we do see a lot of concerns and issues from a cybersecurity standpoint as it relates to outdated technology. And this actually plays into the industrial control space as well, like keeping systems up to date and protecting those systems just like you would your ERP and other back office solutions. High downtime costs, we kind of hit on this a little bit too, but there's if you do have like a ransomware event, well, you might be down for a period of time, right? And the longer you're down, the more impactful it is to you as an organization. And guess what? The bad guys know that too. So there's pressure, right, to do something. Like if it's a ransomware type incident, the bad actors are just watching their clock because they can see the longer that you're down, the more likely you are to potentially pay a ransom or something like that. Going into, Ryan, this is a sticky clicker, but limited resources. This might resonate with a lot of you in the room. So I don't know everybody's, IT situation, but some of you likely have internal IT people that work full-time for you, and you've got a dedicated staff. Some of you may have a quote-unquote IT guy, right, that does part-time work for you, or maybe they wear multiple hats or something like that. And some of you may not have any IT function internally at all. And that speaks, this bullet or this item here around limited resources, the point is, do you have the right resources in place to, hate to say it this way, but to kind of do all this, right? To maintain the systems, to keep you up to speed on patching and keeping servers upgraded, your cybersecurity posture in check, all those things. So yeah, limited resources plays into the IT space as well, just like any other department or role within the company. And then I talked a little bit about ransomware already, but manufacturers are definitely a target for ransomware. Over the past several months, I mean, Jeff and I have been involved with several either clients or just companies that have reached out and said, hey, we're dealing with a ransomware issue right now. Can you come in and help us? Come help coach us. Come help respond. What do we need to be thinking about? What's our first phone call? All kinds of questions come up when these things happen. Quite honestly, it does feel chaotic, especially as a business owner or somebody that's in charge at your organization. If something like this happens, it can be very overwhelming. It can be very chaotic, and you have to have folks that you can lean on to help you through these events as they come up. And this isn't really new, but one of the key things that's going on right now is that small bullet up there that probably nobody can read. It says double extortion. So one of the most popular things that these ransomware gangs are doing right now is not only, so in years past, what they would typically do is they would install the ransomware in your internal server in your computers, and they would encrypt everything. And then they would put a ransomware note on the computer that says, hey, pay me 10 Bitcoin and I'll send you the decryption tool so that you can get your files back. They still do that. The double extortion piece, though, is before they actually encrypt the information that you have, they're going to steal it first. So they're going to take all that information that they have access to and pull it out. They'll keep a copy there, but they'll pull a copy out onto their servers, so they don't encrypt that. That's the double extortion piece. It's like, hey, I've not only encrypted your data on your computers, but I've actually stolen it as well. So I have your information. That speaks back to the intellectual property piece or the confidential information piece. It's like, okay, what information did they steal? How important is that information? Is it critical to our business? What if it gets leaked? What if they disclose it to somebody? What if they sell it? All kinds of questions that come up when that happens. But that's actually one of the most popular tactics that are used today is that double extortion piece to ransomware. And then the last piece is I know a number of you are faced with industry regulation and compliance related requirements as a manufacturer, especially on those that might be federal contractors, right? There's a lot of pressure to do things if you do any government related work related to CMMC requirements and those types of things.
Travis, can I add real quick just another reason to that list? So we work with a number of manufacturers, and one of the things that they struggle with is the number of people that they have to give access to their systems from the outside world, outside of their environment, right? They have vendors that connect to help support equipment. They might have salespeople nationally that are out there selling that need to connect to access internal systems for sales and production information. They have heating and cooling, environmental controls throughout the production environment where outside vendors might be connecting in and accessing that information or accessing those systems. There's a large number of people that might be accessing the environment from the outside. And attackers know that the more people you have accessing the systems from the outside, the more likely there are holes somewhere in that security framework that's supposed to protect your environment. And so we've seen in different areas, in different companies where the lack of controls on those types of connections have opened up security risks that have allowed somebody to get into the environment. We work with a manufacturer in Northeast Ohio, and they had, when we went in and started working, they had over 50 accounts, 50 people that were just vendors that they were allowing access into their network. And none of that access was protected by multi-factor authentication, where on your phone you get a prompt when you go to log in. Once they had access to the network, they had access to the entire network, not just the area that they were supposed to have access to. So that's another reason why manufacturing companies, I think, are targets right now, is because can be a lot more access needed from the outside world than just a doctor's office or a veterinary clinic or some other type of office environment. So if you have a lot of people accessing your environment, even like third-party vendors for technology, ERP vendors and that kind of stuff, if they're insecure and they have access to your environment, you're insecure, right? So if you have that type of situation taking place, think about those things and think about requiring those vendors to meet security standards as well.
Yeah, good point. One thing that I like to talk about a little bit is just, if you think about cybersecurity or protecting your crown jewels, use just like a medieval castle analogy, right? Typically, if you picture a medieval castle in your mind right now, the center of that castle is, I don't know, whatever they're protecting is it your princess or your box of gold or whatever was in the center of a medieval castle? Like those crown jewels, what's in the center of your castle that you're trying to protect? And then you've got layers of defense, right, outside of that. So you've got, the moat around the castle. That's a layer of defense. You're preventing something from trying to get inside. There's one way in, it's the bridge, right? But what Jeff was talking about, like, I think, so there's kind of a couple different areas just to think about. It's how well are the users protected that have access to your data and systems, and the devices that those users have. So those two things are really important and imperative because, remote workforce or whatever you want to call it, we've got employees everywhere with access to a lot of information. So those are two opportunities for protection is check out your user access and your device security controls. Those are imperative. And I might hit on those couple of points here, but this is the takeaway. This is the checklist of a handful plus of things that all of you should just take away and just ask the questions internally. What do we do for security awareness and training? All day long, I'm going to tell you guys that employees and the users with access to information, they can be a good first line of defense, but they can also be the weakest link in the chain. So to make sure that they're not the weakest link in that chain is to do a lot of security awareness training and make sure that they know about some of these risks that are out there. Make sure they understand the information that they have of your organization and the importance of protecting that information. So make sure folks are trained and aware of the risks that are out there. All day long, we still preach on passwords, and we actually are preaching more about passphrases because it makes it a lot easier to remember a passphrase, which is a combination of common words or something like that's easy to remember versus some 52-character gobbledygook of characters in a password, right? So passphrases are actually something that even NIST and some of the other cybersecurity frameworks are recommending is to do passphrases. Those are still very important, but guess what? Passwords and passphrases, they're exposed out there all over the place. So that's why we also need multi-factor authentication. So those two things in combination are really important. So your two-factor authentication, whether it's a mobile app that you're using to do that, or a text message or a phone call or whatever it is to validate you are who you say you are, it's still a fundamental security practice to have in place. Keep systems updated. I know it's expensive. I know oftentimes it's hard to do, but it is imperative from a cybersecurity standpoint, from a downtime standpoint, from a productivity standpoint. There's all kinds of reasons to make sure that systems are updated. We haven't really talked about this much, and Jeff, if you have anything to add to this topic, jump in, but network segmentation. So as a manufacturer, one of the things that we talk to a lot of folks about is making sure you've got your network, your IT technical network, divided up and split up, whether it's through, you can do it in a variety of different ways, but just making it so that, like, if something were to happen on your office computers, for example, your accountant's computers, that it doesn't have the ability to jump into like a ransomware type activity or a malware type activity, that it can't, it can't worm basically is the word. It can't make its way into your production systems. So put those hurdles up. If ask your IT team, and I'm not sure if there's any IT folks in the room here today, but just ask them, what kind of segmentation do we have to make it harder for the bad guy, if he were to get in, to make it harder for him to bring down everything, right? He might bring down or impact a certain area of the business, but he can't impact everything.
And don't just think about production equipment from office equipment. Think about where does your sensitive data live when you talk about separating things, right? So that might be you have a server that has a lot of intellectual property on that. You want to make sure that somebody in the warehouse or in shipping or your receptionist, their computer can't access that server in any way because there's no need for it. And if they do something on the internet that allows somebody to get into their computer, you don't want it to be able to jump into that server that has that intellectual property or that important property. So extend it beyond production, separation between production and operations. You want to think about where your data sits and protecting that important data from as much access as you can.
Yeah, your critical applications, your systems, that sort of thing, just make sure those are protected as much as possible. Endpoint protection, spoke on this a little bit, just the device, all the devices that we have, whether it's these, whether it's your computers, whatever servers there are, make sure we're still running, state-of-the-art antivirus programs, and you'll hear terminology, endpoint detection and response, and those types of tools that are out there. There's some pretty slick endpoint protection tools out there, and they are important. They still provide a very I say basic and fundamental, but they actually do some pretty amazing things. We've talked about AI before. They've got AI built into them, so they're going to find, anomalous type activities that are going on the computer, on the servers, and whatnot. So that's really important. Access controls, Jeff hit on this earlier, making sure the right people have the right access, and that's it. That's what access control is all about. So try and use the principle of least privilege. Give employees and people the access that they need to do their job and nothing more, right? That's what that principle is about. It's also important to periodically do a risk assessment. Understand where your risks are. Have somebody come in, or use an internal resource if you have one, to do a risk assessment, to evaluate the environment and try and identify those gaps and risks that you have. And I tell people this a lot. If everything else fails, we better have good backups and we better have a good disaster recovery plan. So that area is very imperative from a cyber attack, even from just server crashed. Having a good backup and a disaster recovery plan in place is imperative. The last point on this list is if you don't have the internal resources or capacity to do any of this, make sure you partner with professionals that do. I'd be remiss if I'm standing up here and don't mention that, but call Jeff or I, right? The Hummel group mentioned it earlier too. Work with your cyber insurance providers too. Like, use the resources that you have available if you don't have the in-house expertise to manage or do any of these things. Or if you just have a question, right? Lean on the experts.
I'd also say, even if you have internal IT resources, you still want a partnership and build a relationship with a group that can help support you if there is a scenario that goes above where your skill set is, or you need an augmentation of resources. Because if something like this happens to you, then in your organization, your internal IT team is going to be scattered, running down a bunch of different things, and really having a partnership with somebody that can come in and help provide guidance, help provide some calm and stability and knowledge into that situation is really beneficial if that situation happens to you. So don't wait, even if you have an internal IT team, build a relationship with somebody. And that can just mean some lunches and some conversations to make sure you have somebody you can call and can help you in that type of situation.
I could have given you a list of 50 things here, but I tried to keep it to whatever that number is, 10 or so.
Yeah.
So that's it. Questions? Comments? Nothing? Okay. Thank you all.
Thanks.
You need this? little switch there. It is muted now. When you flip it, it'll be green.
Clicker, thanks. Definitely need that. By the way, I'm walking down there. I'm not standing up there.
I figured as much.
We having fun? It's the last session. Are we having fun? All right. And it's Friday. Okay. I'm not going to stand up here. I'm going to walk around. I'm risk averse of standing up on this podium and just standing there as though I'm some sort of professor with my monocle. So I'm going to walk around a little bit. So, legacy and progress, the essential guide to exit planning. I hate that term, exit planning. I had a client tell me one time, I feel like I'm about to die, and we're all going to celebrate it, and we're going to find a way to get me out of here. So I really like the idea of transition, right? So who am I? What do I mean? What are we talking about today? I am Paul Weisinger. I lead an incredibly gifted group of folks at Rea Associates that help business owners understand how they're going to get out and what's going to happen. Either you have Generation Next following you, or you don't. Okay? Because the next 30 years look nothing like the last 30 years. And for many of our clients, they feel as though, and rightfully so, this is a path through a jungle or forest. Right? You think about that imagery, jungle or forest, and they're trying to walk this, and they get paralyzed. Our job is to show them it's not a path through a jungle or forest. So let's think about what we talked about today, what you heard today. Understanding your cash flow, understanding your costs, making decisions based on information education. Wow, that sounds like we're decreasing anxiety, right? Because anxiety is up here when we make decisions without information and education. So design your own path out. You're business owners. This is the single most important event. So that's why our group comes in, because the zeros matter and it's irreversible. That's when I get phone calls. But I'm only one part of the team. Back when we started this process, when I started back in January of '99, we never really had a good process back there in the late 90s, early 2000s. The accountant thought he was a lawyer. The lawyer thought he was the accountant. And the wealth manager thought he was all of them. And we just blew everything up. And it was really a disservice to clients. So today, we work better together as a team. So let's talk about the team. Because this presentation I have is normally 4 hours. Ryan, Mark, and Kyle said, can you do it in 20 minutes? And go. So I'm going to hit the high points, who I am, what the team does, Rea's team, what the transition team looks like, and I'm going to show you what an exit looks like, both internal and external, and talking about the team. I feel like I need my readers. Okay. First person on the team, quarterback. The quarterback is the single source of responsibility for you. Their job is to help you through the entire process, to know the entire process. They're there to help inform and educate of the process. Next, the valuation folks. And as we go around this circle, it's the circle of when you engage everybody. You don't bring everybody in the room at one time, at the first moment. You can, but you don't need to. And I say you don't need to because you should be talking about this at 55. Uh-oh. Well, what if I didn't? Well, the second best time to talk about it and do it is now. If it wasn't yesterday, it's today. If it's not today, it's tomorrow. So let's get past that and let's move on. But you need to develop the team. So the valuation team, we're here to talk about your value, your strike price, and your after-tax cash money you're going to walk away with, either if it's an inside or an outside sale. The Rea Tax team is here to make sure you get the best deal possible when you sell. So I talked about value. What's the value of my company? I don't care. What are you going to sell for? What's that cash? Right? That's more of like an ego or braggart type thing. I sold for X. Yeah, how much you put in your pocket? What's it mean to you? I say, what's it mean to you? Because my job is one thing only, as part of the quarterback evaluation. I want to limit the money going to the G, and I want your money going to the C's. I'm limiting money going to the government, and I want all your money to go to your children, charities, and causes, regardless of who you are. And I'll use myself as an example throughout today. I want my money going to my children, my possible grandchildren, my future great-grandchildren. And of course, I do have charities and causes that mean a lot to Molly and I. That's what this team is designed to do. So then we bring in investment partners. Because again, I'll take you to the point of sale. I'll work with you on the sale and getting the money, but that's where my expertise goes away. We need a wealth manager. Because you're going from CEO of your company to CEO of your family wealth. I had employees. I am now in charge of my family wealth in stewardship. Does my family understand the wealth we have? It may or may not be significant enough with many zeros, but there are some zeros. Do we talk about that blessing? Do we understand our relationship with money? Our money is like drugs and alcohol. It can poison you. What is your relationship with your money? What is your children, your family's relationship with money? Let's talk about it. And these are sticky things, aren't they? Right? These aren't things that are normally talked about in a business. That's the investment part. That's the wealth manager's job as well. They're there to work on the next 30 years, understand the budget, help you devise that plan along with Rea's tax team. Because part of this, with what Kaitlyn talked about with the tax changes, you're going to make a transition. You're going to exit while you have your health and mobility. Maybe Gen Next comes in, maybe they don't. But while I have your attention, we're going to work on an estate plan, considering taxes. Why? Limit the G. Increase the C's. That's my job, right? That's what I want to do for me. I want to limit the money going to the government, and I want it to go to my kids and future grandchildren and charities. Banker. You may or may not need a banker in some of the transactions. We needed the bank to finance a transaction, and we'll talk about that later. Investment banker. Don't have the time to talk about it in 20 minutes, but it's not the evil term you think of. They're there to sell you at a premium. I'll share one story with them. M&A attorney. In the event you're selling to an outside party, we do not want a dabbler. I don't want somebody that's done it once or twice, a couple times. This is a irreversible transaction. In the zeros matter. Bring an M&A attorney. Trust and estate. We're going to bring in Rea's tax team along with a trust and estate attorney. Because we need to put guardrails on this wealth. Because when I pass, I govern from the grave. I have a life insurance trust now that I'm governing from the grave. If I have zeros, I'm making sure that wealth stays in that trust or vehicles that Dave will talk about. But we never asked in 1999, what's the strength of your marriage? Your children's marriage? Do you even know who your children are going to marry? Will they get in a car accident? Will they get sued? We talk about that now. That's sticky. Insurance provider and others. This is the team. Depending on where you are with your journey about as a business owner, whether inside or outside sales, you need to develop all or part of this team. And the goal for you today, if you're on the younger side, or frankly, if you're on young or old, inform and educate yourself. Because this stuff is heavy. Because after we meet, I'm going to ask you to sleep on it. And then wake up and have some questions, sleep on it again, and then again and again. Because it's irreversible and the zeros matter. Oh, okay, we did put it up there. This is supposed to be the journey down that path. It's supposed to be a jungle or forest. This is the actual path that we walk you down. But let's talk about a sale. Let's talk about a sale both inside and outside. And I'm going to give you real life examples. So our team, BV TAS, we not only do valuations for gifting and estate, we do it for merger and acquisition and litigation support. Why do I say that? It's because it's the only thing we do all day and every day. Just like the tax team does taxes, the insurance team does financial statements, Rea Information Systems, IT. This is all we do. We do not dabble. So our team, for one engagement, I'll use this as an example. We were driving down, Molly and I were driving down to a principal meeting, and I got a call from Mark Price. And Mark Price owned a company called the Cleveland Cavaliers. And Mark tells me, hey, Paul, you know that piece of paper that you hand out everywhere? You told me to use as a Post-it note for the future? Yeah, I'm giving you that call finally. What's going on, Mark? My daughter just passed the bar exam. She does not want to be in the business. Well, that's fantastic. No, I just turned down 2 offers. I think my number's wrong and I'm 72. I thought this was my succession plan. I don't know what I'm going to do with the company. I don't know if I can go back. And he went on. And what I heard there was emotion, right? And first and foremost, I stopped him and said, hey, congratulations on your daughter finding her passion. That's pretty awesome. As a dad, I want my daughter to find passion in what she does and the person she'll be with for the remainder of her life, her husband. So congratulations on that. Number 2, I think we need to solve some problems here. Step 1, because this is a staircase. We need to understand what the value of your company is, because you turned down 2 offers. Now, I don't know where your head's at, and I don't know if my number's right, but we got to figure that answer out first before we start charting a path. And what I mean by charting a path is this. Imagine you're driving on your family vacation from here to Outer Banks. You leave 3 o'clock in the morning because, like me, you want to get there right away. You want to beat traffic. You want to show up on the beach. Clark Griswold at his finest. Your headlights only work 200 yards. Oh, it cut me off. Your headlights only work 200 yards. The whole path is not illuminated. But when I talk about a staircase and a path, every 200 yards in my car, I'm taking left or right to accommodate the road. Your road, your journey is the same thing. You're ending up in the same place, but everyone has a different story. Blended family. Second wife. In-laws are in the business. Special needs adult dependents. Wife passed away. Kids in the business, kids out of the business. We've seen it all. Your path will be, your ending path will be one you design, but it has a similar staircase. So in this example with Mark Price, we helped him understand the value of his company and why. How did we land there? Are you best in class? Are you worst in class? Are you in the middle? What would be the sales price? And more importantly, how much would you sell for and keep? What's a good sales price? Not in your favor, not in theirs, but just here. I got to put a stick in the sand to figure something out and inform and educate. From there, the investment partner group, the Rea Wealth Group, took that information and provided it back to Mark and say, this is how you would live for the remainder of your life. In that example, we were okay. If not, we'd say you have a value gap. You have a perception of value of here, it's really here. And we educate on how we get there. Much like mill work or carpentry work, my team could frame a house, build a chair, build a deck, or a table. So we inform and educate our client how we got to our value proposition, the value spot, I should say. And if there's a value gap, what do we need to do to get to that value? And how long will it take us to get there? To help him get to the point on step 2, his personal financial plan. In conjunction for Mark, we introduced someone to assist in his sale. And there's a difference between a business broker and an investment banker. In this instance, the investment banker, whose job it is to understand every buyer, whether they're private equity, strategic, competition, or family office. All of them are different. And they're all going to pay different dollar amounts. Private equity the most. then strategic, third is competition. Family office is going to run neck and neck with competition. And how much of a premium they'll pay for you. We worked through that process. We discussed his exit options. During this time, we educated Mark on when he wanted to get out, because he, in his head, suffered a great many battles like Winston Churchill, but got to a deflation point of saying, I just want to be done and out. And what I'd explained to Mark is the buyer most likely will want you to be around for a year, maybe a year and a half, maybe two, but we'll just say a year. And it takes 9 to 12 months to sell. That's 2 years. That did not make Mark happy. But we needed to provide information. We needed to be direct. We needed to be honest and have candor. We went through the process. The investment bank did successfully sell the Cleveland Cavaliers. And as we went through this process, we did the estate plan because we had his attention. And with that, he was able to focus on what he would live off of for the remainder of his life. And privately so, he had in his possession the plan for the remainder of his life. What would happen to the remainder of his wealth that he generated? This was a huge success for us. We felt success because we saw it within him and our other clients. We helped him on this journey. We helped him down the path that's not through a forest or jungle. It's asphalt laden. And we take every client down this path. This was helpful for their family unit. And I say family unit because it's a family with a bunch of different roofs, right? Children in the business, out. The daughter was once in, she's out, finding her passion. In addition to that, specifically for Mark in this case, we did counsel him, Ray Wealth in our group, about the relationship with money. When's the best time to give money to your children? When you're 88 and past and they're 68 and they don't care? Nope, that's old school. That's the old way of thinking. Maybe when they need it, when they have their first child. For me, my father-in-law, for his relationship with money, he likes to say, hey guys, there's 8 of you and a number of grandchildren. I'll pay for the family vacation. We're going to go here. And that's how he provides for his wealth for us. Because we can't afford this trip, but he gets to steal us, right? He gets to steal us that week and feel that here. So he provides for the benefit of outside just handing cash. Because we know if we hand cash to someone, they're going to spend it. So how are you going to spend your wealth on your children? Education? Sure. Medical needs? Always. So Mark went through this wonderful process, and furthermore, because of the blessings he's built, once a year he sits down with his blood lineage and talks about those blessings, how grateful everyone should be for what happened to his life and what was given to him and the opportunities he took in place. Now we're teaching the future generation stewardship. This is not your money. Always think it's the next generation's money, right? It's someone else's. You get to enjoy it, but preserve it. Same sales process, inside transaction. Back in 2008 through 10, I had 3 brothers running a company, and they were generation 2. 2 of the brothers had children in the business. The third did not. G3 was excited to get in, make their changes, ready to go. G2 agreed, or they're approximately the same age, they'd all get out at the same moment in time with a plan. But they didn't understand what the plan looked like. How is it going to be devised? How are they going to get taxed? How are they going to live? 2 brothers, kids in the business, 1 without. The 1 without wants his money today, a lot of it. The 2 with kids in the business, well, can we make it a little easier on them? Competing priorities. We got to figure things out here, and that's okay. We run a series of scenario analysis showing how the teeter-totter works. Because as an owner of a business, what's good for me is bad for the buyer, if you're going to go in my favor. So we need to figure out how to do this, which is accomplishable. And we have to figure it out in a three-dimensional way because we have one brother not having children in the business. His competing priorities is, well, my kids found their own passion, not here. I don't feel like I should be, quote unquote, penalized by waiting. Not a problem. We figured it out. Lots of information and education. We created the redemption price, which is a non-deductible payment going out, and then a deductible payment going out, meaning we could lower the taxes for the company. Because again, what am I doing? Limiting the G. We see this picture here with outgoing generation in this circle. The circle is the company, so we have to take care of that. And generation next. The objective for generation outgoing is to understand the wealth that they're walking out with the wealth manager, how they're going to survive, and to make sure that they're happy with their decision, because they're in the driver's seat, the business owner leaving. The company must not only accomplish a transaction, but meet its strategic goals going forward. Then generation next coming in has to understand what the path looks like. In this example, they elected to go bank rather than self-finance the company. Banks are now another interested party. Their anxiety is up here because they have to fund this thing. So we came up with how we're getting you out, the path outgoing for the generation outgoing, path incoming, and now what is the projected cash flows of the company looking like going forward? And does it meet its loan covenants? The bank's on board. They see the loan covenants meet. They have projections, conservatively prepared, not aggressively. And now the bank's willing to help in this example. Now we have Gen 2 enjoying their chapter next with their health and mobility with the proceeds that makes them happy. Not burdening the company to an extent that maybe they would if they were selling it outright, because the children are still going to work there. And we do have examples of children working in the business. If I have time, I'll explain one. But G3 was just as happy because they had their roadmap. We prepared the roadmap as long as you do this, you're successful, this company will survive and be fruitful in the future. I'm happy to say that not only did it work, the company doubled in size. And now in 2024, G3, they're looking to make an exit because there are various ages of G3. G4 does not want to get in the business. G3 does not want them to get in the business. Competing priorities. Now we brought the investment bank to the table, and now we're walking down the similar route as the first example I gave you. What does this mean to me and my family unit? Because now we have 4 other families outside of G2 that's already exited. Great story, wonderful success. Lots of little steps along the way, but that's okay. Headlights, right? Every couple hundred yards, we'll just shift our direction. So when do you get us involved? Now. It takes years to discuss this and for your head and gut to get in alignment, right? And there's the vehicles that we need to put in place to protect you. We don't need to discuss all of them, but we can discuss a few. What are we going to do with the partner real estate? I have extra money here. I don't want the next generation to get it. Well, we'll do the Kennedy Trust, Generation Skipping Trust. I need spousal trusts, slats. All these are great words, and Dave's going to talk about them in more detail because he's who I rely on or lean on, the experts, because again, like the quarterback, I hand the ball off. But we're here to assist those families. And I'll give you an example about one of the families we assisted. There's a family that, husband and wife, they created a company, and they came to us because mom was done. Physically, mentally, she could not work anymore. We can solve that with assistants and accounting folks, but that doesn't solve the larger equation that mom is done, and she wants husband to be done. And we have son and son-in-law in the business. Paul, we think the company's worth $10 million. Can you provide us what the company's worth, scenarios getting out of the business and getting them in? We want to start process. We want to start thinking about it. After I did the evaluation, I stopped all work. I said, Jeff and Pam, your company's not worth $10 million. It's worth $100 million. Let me tell you how we got there and why. This clearly floored them, this specific family. I asked them to think about what they want to do, and meaning sleep on it and sleep on it again, and let's revisit this. Because I gave them their options in that initial meeting, overwhelmed them, but said, let's follow up in 2 weeks, but sleep on it. During this time, because you've heard the phrase earlier from Jeremy, and he said we need a feedback loop. I don't know how to chart a path unless you tell me what you want to have happen. I don't know what vehicle, nor does Dave, what vehicles to put in place unless you tell me your objectives. Now, I'll explain what I mean in a moment, because they came back to us and said, you know, we've talked about it as a family. Talked to my wife, who was there, and talked to my son and son-in-law, and I think we're gonna sell. This is just something that's so meaningful to us and our employees that we're gonna sell. So we started talking about what that would look like and what that would mean, because it's a taxable event, $100 million. Not only is it taxable immediately, it's taxable in your state when you pass, given what we heard from Kaitlyn. As we start talking more and more about this, we're getting, refined, we're narrowing the bookends. And it was told to us closer to the end, and there was a question that Paul Gregory always says to me, he goes, hey, you know how to have a conversation? How? Ask the right questions. And we didn't ask the right questions soon enough. And I talked about the C's, but I didn't directly say, hey, what charity and causes are important to you, and do you want to do anything about that? And he said, yeah, after we sell the company, Paul, we're only going to keep 1/10 of it. The other 1/10 goes to this daughter, this. Employees get 1/10, but all the remaining 4/10 of the entire proceeds goes to our charities and causes, because they understood the poisoning of money for them. They didn't want that money. It was important that I heard that, because then we can tax plan. And I said, whoa, do you have them identified? Well, we do. Well, maybe they should own the stock, not you. So when you sell, you get taxed, the charity doesn't pay tax on that. Now the charity gets more money instead of getting after-tax money. I just limited the G. But I met their objective. Feedback loop. That's why we need to start these conversations now, because your objectives and principles can change. We can create a rough plan that we put away and say, okay, are we on track? Which is the same as your estate plan. Your estate plan is the same thing. You're going to put it there until things change. And from what I just heard from Kaitlyn and from what we see on TV, tax laws are changing. So we have to pick a direction. Standing still doesn't necessarily work. So the takeaways here is understand you are going to make a transition. Make it on your terms. Be deliberate. You've been deliberate your entire careers at what you do. Inform and educate yourself. Understand your options and your path out. And accept, not that as I have heard, I don't understand, accept the fact the next 30 years don't look like the past 30. And either you're going to sell it internally or externally, but understand all these options and then sleep on it. Any questions? Not seeing any, and that's okay. Not all questions are supposed to be made in a public forum. I'll be sticking around afterwards after we're all done. Thank you. Appreciate it. Next is Dave Shallenberger, who needs clearly this clicker.
So Paul just talked about all the fun stuff in this part of the presentation. I'll just talk about some of the stuff that happens in between. Because the impacts and everything, that's the why it's so important. But what do we need to think about it from there? So one of the steps that he was talking about is understanding how we're going to convey the business. And then what he was talking about, it could take 5 years, 10 years, 3 years to sell the business, but it's good to start thinking about it now, because between now and when you actually convey the business, facts on the ground change. You may have a child that no longer wants to be involved in the business. The economy may impact negatively or positively your specific environment, which may increase or decrease the value of your business. So getting an understanding of the 5 ways generally to sell or convey your business is important. I'll kind of start with the bookends, the ones that we hear kind of the most often. especially around here, is the first one is, sale or gift to the next generation. Green is kind of indicating that it's generally seen as a positive. Red's kind of a negative, yellow somewhere in between on the slides. But sale or gift to the next generation helps preserve the family legacy. The kids understand what it is if they're in the business. They want to see the family name or the business name survive. The question then becomes, do you want to do this all at once? Do you want to do it over time? Do we need that time, that time frame to teach the children what it's like or what it means to be an owner of the business? Especially, I feel like these days, they need a path to success first. They may not necessarily, especially the younger generation, they may not necessarily just, I'll get my hands dirty and go do it. It's not that they're afraid, it's just that the teaching and training aspect has changed. The path is more important, that it's kind of handed out, and so maybe you want to consider doing something over time. The questions here is, does the current generation need the money? Or is it more important to preserve the legacy? So that might be the difference between a gift or a sale, or a partial gift and a partial sale. In any event, generally, the next generation doesn't have the cash to just go out and buy the business. So the current generation is going to finance that. And then they would get their cash over time. There's several different ways and methods that we could use to mix and balance the tax impacts of that, like Paul was indicating earlier. But really the first hitch is, okay, it's probably going to be a little bit less money. It's not the most valuable form of sale, but it's going to preserve that legacy. My children are going to have, be able to continue their way of life as owners of the business. The next is kind of the other bookend. It's that sale to a strategic buyer. The strategic buyer is probably going to give you a higher multiple. They know your business. There's a reason that they want to buy it. They know you pretty well, so that means your due diligence period is usually reduced, or at least the amount of work that's involved in due diligence is less, because they know you and your business very well. That strategic buyer is probably not going to require the seller to hang on to a piece of the business. They know it so well, they're going to just pay you out. You're going to get your cash up front. But one of the downsides is they might ask you to stay around a little bit longer. A longer non-compete. They don't want you going off and starting off your own thing. They might ask you to work in the business for a few years. Generally, this will be taxed as an asset sale. And just in broad terms, asset sales for the seller are generally bad. Stock sales for the seller are generally good. And then it's vice versa for the buyer. The buyer wants an asset sale. They don't want a stock or asset purchase. They don't want a stock purchase. Reason being is when you buy assets, you get to depreciate them. When you buy stock, you're just getting the stock and you're taking on the books and records of the company as it was. So there's a natural battle as to how that works out. And there are different tools that can be used to balance those things, but that's the general premise. One of the bad things on this sale to a strategic buyer, and it's not necessarily bad, it just depends on your priorities, is that the name of your business is probably going to go away. That family legacy and the importance of that is probably going to be replaced by that strategic buyer. They're going to brand it in their own way. Now, they may keep it and say, Dave Shallenberger Corp., a division of, their business. There might be something there, but that can go away. So that also means it may have an impact to the company culture, going on to the impact to employees. They're used to working, quote, for the old man. Well, when he's not there, what does that do? Does retention become an issue or things like that? But at the same time, this can usually be one of the higher multiples or highest multiples in the sale of a business. The next category generally is sale of key employees. This probably is going to generate more cash than a family sale. But it's certainly going to be less than a sale to a strategic buyer or private equity. Because again, those key employees typically don't have the cash accumulated to just go buy this. They may be able to finance it and burden the company with that debt and get the owner some cash, but not all banks are going to finance that whole deal. It will give the seller a bit more control. You're selling to your employees. The employees know the business. both sides are going to want to make it work out so that we have continued culture and continued business terms within there. And so both are incented, so the seller kind of has a lot of influence in this process. Sometimes the employees don't have the business experience exactly to go buy a business, and they're kind of actually almost leaning on that seller a bit for their advice. So there's a lot of control there. There's almost, well, I shouldn't say almost, no. There's little due diligence required relative to the other conveyance methods other than the family. Because the employees know the business so well, they generally know the risks, they know what the good performance means and what a bad performance means. So they're already comfortable with the company. On the downside, there's almost always going to be continued involvement in the company, which has pluses and minuses. If the seller wants to get out of the company and go move off to Florida or Colorado or something, but they're needed in the business to help transition some things, then that might delay that desire to move. Well, it doesn't delay the desire, it might delay the ability to make that move. But you're invested in the company, it's been your company, so you want to see it succeed, so you do delay it. But on the other side of that, the negative side of that is its acceptance by the other employees. So if a small group of employees, say, the CFO or the president that you were previously the CEO, they go together and they buy the company, what happens to those employees that were excluded from the opportunity if you're selling to just a management team or a select few? How are they going to accept? How are they going to accept them as the new owners and the new decision makers if the seller has to stay around just to help transition some things within the business? It's just something to think about. It's not necessarily bad. It's just how do you balance that out? How do you address it if this is the method of conveyance? The next category would be sell to an ESOP, employee stock ownership plan. Oftentimes this is a way it's seen to kind of preserve the company legacy because it carries on what the old man wanted, so to speak, again, to use that analogy. It's almost always a stock sale. All of the employees get to participate within certain reasons, but it's almost all of them, if not all. And it gives the owner a potential opportunity to defer some gain. It doesn't have to be structured that way, but often it is structured that way. Kind of some of the downside is it's going to be a partial cash. You're going to get some cash up front, then you're going to have to carry some financing on the back end. Generally, a bank comes in, it helps to finance that first purchase payment, and then the seller carries that note for some time. And so there is some risk there. I mean, the risk is what happens if ESOP is not successful. I mean, we have seen that. It doesn't always happen. I mean, obviously you want it to be successful. One of the largest ESOPs in the country has been around for years, and it's right in our backyard with Davy Tree. They've been very successful for a very long time. I don't mean that as a negative. I just mean that it is a risk to be aware of when you're in this situation. ESOPs do tend to be expensive. They are a retirement plan that gets kind of added onto the 401k, which means there's additional compliance. Then you also have to employ a trustee, or the company has to employ the trustee to administer the ESOP. So it's not for the faint of heart, but it can be a great thing to preserve the legacy and give all the employees an opportunity to become the entrepreneurs and benefit from what it means to be an owner. I think the last one here is the third-party sale, private equity. This is probably going to be your highest multiple. Chances are, because of that, with PA firms coming in, they're probably going to want some rollover equity, which means on the downside, you're not going to get paid everything up front. On the upside, it means that you got a potential second bite at the apple when PE goes to sell that business. So, what are the pluses and minuses? We've seen a lot of PE activity over the last, 3 to 5 years, just from the different opportunities that have been out there. I think, the Ohio area is ripe for opportunities for PE because we do things so well on the manufacturing side. Generally, there'll be, on the plus side, there's a great deal of stability after closing. The reason for that being is they're not looking to replace your employees. You know, that strategic buyer that I talked about earlier, there's a good chance they're going to replace some of your employees with their own team. They're going to mix the teams together. You know, there might be some turnover. On the PE side, they're not interested in running the business. They're interested in having the right team already in place or finding the right team that can run that business. So usually there's a stability of your team after closing. On the downside, it's going to be an asset sale almost every time, so they can get that depreciation. You know, it's part of the leverage that they're looking for. There probably will be ongoing owner involvement, so they're going to look for 2, 3, 5-year commitment from that owner, just depending upon circumstances. But you'll get a lot of cash up front. On one other downside to that, though, is the due diligence with PE is a lot. It's probably the highest amount of due diligence time and documentation and the length of time in order to get from LOI to close is going to be with a third-party sale. Again, it's not necessarily bad. You'll learn a lot of things about your business doing it, so will they, though. So that is going to impact your price. Parting thoughts just on that piece alone, as Paul mentioned earlier, you want to surround yourself with a competent team. You know your business best out of anyone. Other people probably know the law, tax, how to negotiate, perhaps better than you, or perhaps can advocate better on your behalf than you could with the person on the other side of the table. But it's balancing all these things to determine what the right path is. So as Paul mentioned, Mark in his example was planning to transition to his daughter, then all of a sudden daughter decides that she wants to be in something else. Now we have a new plan. So knowing about all of these different conveyances is important just in case the facts on the ground do change. As Paul mentioned, business brokers, generally there's what we're seeing is probably a limited benefit. You're getting calls probably, maybe not all the time, but periodically from brokers that are trying to get you interested in selling your business. They're not bad. Sometimes they're wonderful for exactly what they do because they find that potential buyer, they can market the business. In other cases, many of the probably 4 out of the 5 opportunities of conveyances that are up there, a broker may not be needed. So it's all just a matter of what path you and your family would like to go down. Other things to consider is seller-owned real estate. When that's not in the business, that's something else that has to be dealt with. Will that buyer want the real estate? Strategic buyer might say yes. PE might say no, because we're going to move your operations to our other plant. I mean, actually, any of the buyers could do that, but just something else that needs to be considered during the transaction. Another thing, as Paul did indicate earlier as well, is what are you going to do for the employees that got you there? Every business has those employees that really got them to where they were at to get that value that is being acquired. In some cases, family transition, for example, it may not be as important to, pay out, quote unquote, those key employees. You just want their continued employment. In other cases where you're selling to private equity, you feel as a business owner, or you might just think that it's right to make sure that they can participate in that in some fashion. And I would agree with that. Other things to think about, as I'll get into a little bit, is bequests, charitable donations. And with advanced planning, we can also, look at some tax credits and incentives, either by way of the local governments keeping them there, or actually purchasing some credits on the open market that can help offset what the tax implications are. So the next really exciting part is what the importance of estate planning is. This is where a lot of people kind of glaze over. But all this stuff it goes together, because you're talking about probably the most valuable thing for a business owner. It's their business and it's their legacy. Those two things go together. And for the longest time, when I first started, estate planning was really important because Ohio put in an estate tax for estates worth more than $383,000. Well, that went away, so it was a little bit less important. And then, with the Trump era changes, TCJA, the estate tax exemption went from $6 million to $13 million. A lot of our taxpayers or a lot of our clients they're not in that $13 million bucket, or they don't think that they are. Maybe that's just as important. But
with the sunset in 2025, that's going to drop back down to, 13 million for the couple, so $6 million per individual. And now all of a sudden they're on the cusp. We have a lot of folks that we work with that we know are well over, and so we have to do the estate planning anyways. We have a lot of people that are on the cusp of, well, maybe I have a taxable estate, maybe I don't. Well, do you really even know what your business is worth? Do you have an idea of what it's actually worth to know, are you at risk? If you have a business that's worth 13 million with your other assets, you may have a taxable estate, you may have a plan that you need to go through. So there are all those tax reasons why it's important to kind of sit down and think about and understand both your personal financial statement as well as what you want to do with your estate planning. But then there's some other stuff too. It's not just taxes. While that drives a lot, things like probate. If someone dies with just a will in place or no will at all of their assets are going to be put on notice to the public through the probate filing process. One simple way to kind of get a little bit of privacy, at least, is by using a trust. Trust vehicles don't go through probate. The advantage of using trust, not only does it give you some privacy, but it gives the trustee of the trust greater abilities than an executor of an estate has. An executor of an estate has to apply to the court to do anything with your assets, liquidate them, pay them out to your beneficiaries, whatever. The trustee of a trust does not. They're authorized within that document, and they can make some decisions to effectively transfer the business, whether that be to sell a business or to help a daughter who survives make a down payment on a home. They don't have to go to a judge to get that approved. The other idea with a trust is that continues. An estate will eventually on its own pass away. It has a finite end. The IRS wants to see them to be completed within 2 years. A trust can live a longer legacy, meaning that you have a much greater ability, as kind of Paul put it, to manage from the grave. You're giving your children, grandchildren, perhaps a little bit of advice through the trustee in the document that you put together, how you want your assets to function, how you want them to be divided, and perhaps how quickly they can get to them. And it would also provide some creditor protection to those beneficiaries. And that's important too, in case, hey, I really don't like my child's spouse. I don't trust them. I don't trust the strength of their marriage. I don't want my son or my daughter to get those assets outright, because I think that if they do, there's a good chance of divorce, and then my son-in-law or daughter-in-law could take 50% of those assets. Well, if it's in trust, you don't have that issue for your child. Oops. When is it important to think about estate planning? I mean, we've been talking about in this discussion here just the potential harvesting of a large investment. Prior to that is even better. But other opportunities that I would think about and trying to get somebody involved with is, upon marriage, divorce, children, the basics. Do I have a guardian for my child? Is something that often gets put into the estate plan. Other items are, with retirement planning, or other life events that are significant. It could be an inheritance from your own parents, where your net worth changes drastically. So just some real basics on what different kinds of trusts are. I'm not going to get into anything specific here. The revocable living trust, it's an inter vivos trust. That's what I call the safety net that I think almost all of our clients should have. What that does is that safety net puts it into a plan such that if you die, the basic things are covered, but you can always change that during your life. You can put assets in there, you can take them out of there, you can always change it. An irrevocable trust, there's lots of them, and I kind of enumerate them there for all their different purposes. But what that does is you're making a permanent gift. A gift tax return generally is reported or sale, but you cannot change the terms of an irrevocable trust. A revocable living trust becomes irrevocable upon someone's death, with certain limited exceptions that might be written in. So like I said, I would first look to, on the basic plan, a revocable living trust. Do I have what I need in place? There's all sorts of special purpose trusts that's dependent upon what your interests are. Anything from life insurance to charitable trusts, more sophisticated transfers to children with grats or gruts,
or if we're looking at trying to do intergenerational or multi-generational transfers, we're looking at legacy trusts. And the one that can't be forgotten today anymore is the Medicaid trust, especially with healthcare costs not exactly going down anytime soon. So again, the basics, will, healthcare power of attorney. Reviewing your designated beneficiaries is a big thing. Leaving a 401k or an IRA into your estate, especially with the new rules on IRAs and withdrawals that are required from inherited IRAs, you don't want those in your estate. They have to come out very, very quickly, versus if you have a person named, there's an opportunity to take that out over a longer period of time, which not only defers the tax, but likely it's going to get us into lower tax bracket rates. Other opportunities that I didn't really get into earlier, but they are gifting strategies, is funding 529 plans for educational savings, making annual exclusion gifts if you have the ability to, whether that be in cash, stock, or otherwise, and then thinking about your charities, whether that be giving them to them directly or putting up a donor advised fund, so you're contributing to your causes perhaps sooner than later. Again, a lot of people, kind of giving a plug to our business valuation team, we don't realize what the value of our business is today. And that's where a lot of this plan starts. I've been in 3 meetings in the last 4 days, and every single one of them has been, okay, we have a great plan, but how much is the business worth? Because how much the business is worth can change that plan entirely. That's one of those facts on the ground that I was talking about earlier, that you may choose this plan versus that plan, depending upon simply the value of the business. And with inflation, the way it's been over the past few years, and the markets being the way that they are, it's not as simple as just saying, well, here's the formula that I found online. It's X times EBITDA or Y times revenue. I do think that it's worth knowing or getting an idea of what the business is actually worth in order to do some of that planning. So with that, I think I can turn it over to that, and I'm going to assume that Ryan, you're going to say something now? Maybe Paul will instead.
Any questions for Dave?
I probably bored them, Paul.
What's that?
I said I probably bored them and barely kept them
God.
awake. They're not going to be questions.
So I was asked a question it's 2 questions by a few in the room. I'll address number 1 because it's the serious one. Yes, we will be sticking around here. I'll be sticking around here afterwards. Again, not all conversations are made to be in public. And the second question was, given the fact that you're wearing a tie, are you from Cleveland or Columbus? The answer is yes. My mother's looking down from me from heaven. Given the opportunity to speak in front of you today, she would be greatly disappointed if I did not wear a tie. And yes, I am from Cleveland, from the suburbs. But I do travel. The entire team travels throughout all of our offices, including down south or to our clients' offices. So we'll stick around afterwards. Ryan?
Yep.